Good morning, Canada. Welcome back to an episode of Question Period. Today is December 9, 2024, and we are facing the final vote of non-confidence for the year 2024. Pierre Poilievre has put forward a couple of them since they've resumed from summer break, but here we are faced with a potential early Christmas present to Canadians. This is going to be extremely exciting and extremely tense, which is why I'm doing the never attempted before, starting a live stream pretty much hours before question period begins. But there is so much going on, and that's what we're going to be taking a look at right now. So they are currently in the House. The politicians, most of the Conservatives are currently in the House, and they are already debating because it is opposition day. So they are throwing everything at the Liberals today. And then after question period, you're going to have the vote of non-confidence. Now, how is this vote going to play out? Will it be enough for Pierre Poilievre to get the votes needed to topple the government? Well, I actually have a breakdown for you that I posted on X. But for those that don't follow me on X, which you should absolutely do, because that's where you're going to get this stuff immediately, hot off the press, before I even have time to make a video. Let's take a look at what we're dealing with today. But before we get into it, folks, I do want to encourage you all to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. It does really help grow, and then you're not going to miss any of these live streams. In fact, the best way to safeguard actually be notified for these live streams is by clicking and tap that little bell notification. That's the best way. It's called the post notification. So without further ado, let's get into my analysis of what's going to come today. All right. Here we go, folks. Today is the day, folks. The final vote on confidence of the year. Will it be enough to topple the government? Here is the detailed breakdown. Today, the House Commons will be voting on a Conservative non-confidence motion sponsored by the CPC leader, Pierre Poilievre. Two such motions have been presented to the House during this fall parliamentary session, yet both have failed, with the Bloc, the Libs, and the NDP and the Greens unanimously voting nay. Now, this one is different. This one is very different because for the first time ever, the Bloc Québécois said they would actually support the motion. And I need to pause reading this right now because they didn't just say they were going to support it. They actually have tried to put the motion forward themselves. But Pierre Poilievre did that sneaky little reach around where he froze Parliament. You know how like a few weeks ago, a month ago, everyone was making these videos of, oh, they're going to prorogue the government. It's frozen. What's going to happen? That's still going on right now because Pierre Poilievre demanded that the RCMP investigate the SDTC scandal. He went to the cops. He called the cops on Trudeau, and the cops actually answered the call and said, shit, we gotta put the donuts down and go do our job. And so they started to do their job. Now, they didn't find anything, of course, because the Liberals are pretty sneaky like that, but nonetheless, while that investigation has been taking place, government has been on complete pause. So the Bloc has said, hey, you know what, we will absolutely put forward the vote of non-confidence, but Pierre Poilievre, he's blocking Parliament. So they actually wanted to do it, but they couldn't. The only one that could do it was Pierre. So it's a very interesting strategy. You know, when people talk about playing chess, 1D chess, 2D chess, I feel like Pierre is playing chess and the other folks, right, are playing checkers. But nonetheless, let's get back to my thread here because this explains in great detail what we're about to see. This time, the Bloc Québécois said they would support the motion. So here's how a successful vote of non-confidence could look like. Since the speaker doesn't vote, Poilievre needs 50% plus one of 337 MPs. This means he needs 169 if every single member of parliament votes. Yay! CPC is going to have 119. Bloc is going to have 33 votes. Independent is going to have 2 votes. And the Liberal Rebels could potentially have 15 votes. Now, the nays, the Liberals are going to do 138 votes. The NDP is going to do 25. The Greens are going to do 2, and 2 other independents are going to vote nay. This is likely how this is going to play out, folks. Almost 40 Liberal MPs have signed a letter to oust Justin Trudeau as part of their party. As the leader of their party, rather. If even just 11 of them abstain from voting, Poilievre needs 164 MPs to vote in favor. Because keep in mind, you don't just need to vote yay or nay. You can actually abstain from voting as a form of saying, I don't want to get in the mix while mommy and daddy are fighting. I'm just going to stand on the sidelines, as a protest, whatever the intent is. Abstaining from voting can actually happen, especially with the vote in non-confidence. All right. So that would mean yays, the Conservatives would have 119, the Blocs would have 33, Independents would have 2, and there would be potentially 10 Liberal rebels. Nays, 133 Libs, 25 NDPs, 2 Greens, and 2 Independents. Of course, many things could happen today. Make sure to tune in and follow to stay updated with the latest news. I sure hope we get to see an election before November 2025. And so this is the last little Hail Mary that we can do before it's tout fini, right? Before there's they're done for the session. So I want to know down in the comments what you guys think of what's going to happen today. Is it going to be enough? Are they going to have enough votes? Will people abstain? I've seen some people saying that they don't trust the Bloc. They don't think the Bloc is going to vote in favor of the non-confidence. Folks, let me tell you, I don't trust the Bloc either, but they will absolutely vote in favor of the non-confidence. They absolutely will. The NDP likely to stick with Trudeau, but again, it's going to come down to independent. They actually have a little bit of pull. Greens are going to side with Trudeau. Very weird, but still that's going to happen. It's going to come down to the rebels, right? It's going to come down to the rebels and maybe people that want to abstain from voting. There's a lot of conflicts that are happening. We've seen on the House floor, fights have been almost breaking out. Jagmeet is threatening to beat up people. There's a lot of shit that happens that we don't necessarily get to see. And so all these backdoor deals, all these friendships that are being made and collapsing, there's a lot of moving parts to this. And it all boils down to today. How is today going to play out? Well, they are in the House right now, like I said, and it is opposition day. So Pierre Poilievre gets the speaking torch for the majority of the day. In fact, he's in the House right now. I just paused the live feed. So we're going to be, maybe a few seconds behind. But let's take a look what Pierre Poilievre is saying. Because let me tell you, I didn't go live at 9:30 in the morning my time for no reason. All right? Shit's about to happen. And so we're going to watch shit happen together. There we go.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We have just finally learned on the 19th of December, the Minister for Finance will table an economic statement. It will be one of the most late economic statements in the history of our country because this government wants to avoid having to reveal the following. This Prime Minister is weak and he has completely lost the plot when it comes to spending taxes, and increasing the cost of living. We have one single message. We are just asking for one thing in this statement. Stop inflationary spending that is increasing the cost of living. Stop tax increases that are killing jobs. Stop adding to Canadians' debt. Stop threatening social programs with irresponsible decisions. Stop. Please stop. That is the Conservative request. And today, we rise to ask the government to stop taxes on new homes and condos. The biggest part of a housing cost isn't the carpenters, it's not materials, it's not buying the land itself, it's the sheer burden of taxes and red tape. Mm-hmm. Taxes from all three levels of government that increase the cost of housing, prices that are now impossibly high for our youth. And that is the reason for which the common sense Conservatives will eliminate GST on new homes to save up to $50,000 for a Quebec family, for example, who just wants a nice home to live in. Now, we're different to other parties. Other parties think that the government should just take the money and then give it to other levels of government, who will then give it to another level of government, who will then give that to the bureaucrats, who will, at the end of the day, approve housing after all that process. Now, we believe that the shortest line is a short highway from point A to point B, and that is why we want money to be sent directly into the pockets of those who are buying the houses by reducing the tax burden. Government statistics have shown us the following with regards to eliminating GST on housing, on apartments. According to these statistics, we can estimate that this will stimulate 30,000 more condos being built every single year. Less of a tax burden, more building. Now that's a solution that will truly deliver for everyone.
And the aspect that I'm the most proud of is that we will eliminate the Housing Accelerator Fund, or as I call it, the Disaccelerator Fund, which is actually slowing down construction. I am very proud to announce that we're going to scrap that program. A program the Liberals spent $8 billion on in order to bloat the bureaucracy and to give more money to greedy politicians. I find it frankly pathetic that the housing minister calls up mayors to say, look, I've given you a big check. You need to send a letter asking for my program to stay in place, even if it actually slows down housing construction. And of course, those politicians say, yes, well, I want that taxpayer money. I want the checks. Of course, politicians want money. But we are not here to work for other politicians. We are here to work for taxpayers and for youth, young Canadians who want to buy homes.
Alors c'est avec beaucoup de fierté que je vais éliminer.
So I will be very proud to eliminate these programs. It's not that these programs don't help at all. It would be wrong and it would be incorrect to say that they don't help. It's worse than that. They actually do harm. The thing is that these bureaucrats, it's not just that they're not helping, it's that they're actually hurting. These layers upon layers of bureaucracy are actually preventing construction. And we know that municipalities' revenue has gone up twice as fast as inflation. This has been the case for 20 years. So if giving more money to municipalities actually sped up the construction of affordable housing, we would have the most affordable housing in the world. But that's clearly not the solution. The solution is to eliminate red tape, to scrap taxes, to leave the money in the pockets of people who are building and buying homes. And that is what we will do by scrapping GST on new builds, to end up saving up to $5,000 per Canadian family.
Speaker.
Here we go.
Learn that the Minister of Finance is finally going to introduce her fall economic update on December 19th. She calls it a fall update. Santa Claus will already have been preparing to lift off from North Pole. The snow will have been falling. The leaves have long disappeared into the earth, Madam Speaker, and they have disintegrated and biodegraded because it has been so long since those leaves actually fell, Madam Speaker, and yet we are waiting until the 19th because she wants to hide the fact that the weak Prime Minister has lost control of deficits, has lost control of spending, has lost control of our economy. We will see if she keeps her solemn commitment to a $40 billion deficit or whether that promise will also go by the wayside. That's why we have only one request. Stop. Just stop. In the name of God, stop the inflationary spending. Stop doubling debt. Stop driving up taxes on starving Canadians. Stop everything you're doing until we get a carbon tax election, at which time common sense conservatives can axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime.
There you go, man. Well said.
And they can stop taxing new homes. That's why common sense conservatives are proposing to get rid of the GST on new homes, to save up to $50,000 on a home for a young family trying to start out. After this government doubled the cost, it's the least that we could do. Now, they would rather have the money go to bureaucrats. They believe in trickle-down government. They take from the people, give it to one government, that gives it to another government, that gives it to a third government, that gives it to some bureaucrats, and these bureaucrats apparently are going to start shuffling papers more quickly to eventually approve some homes. It's not that this program, the Housing Accelerator, that I planned with delight to get rid of, it's not that it hasn't helped. It is that it has made the problem so much worse. Because when you give more money to bureaucrats, it's not that they don't do helpful things. It's that they stand in the way and cause even more harm. Listen to one developer who said just the other day, over the last 10 years, the list of application requirements has increased exponentially, and so has the number of bureaucrats looking at your application. And there's often a pattern of staff waiting till the last day. On the day 29 of 30, they write back with a comment pertaining to something minor, which triggers another cycle. Imagine 3 or 4 such reviews of cycle, Madam Speaker. The more of these bureaucrats, the more layers, the more delay we need. By getting rid of this program alone and doing nothing else, we will speed up housing construction. And yes, there will be greedy, fat cat, big city politicians who will whine and complain because they had expected to have that money to build their empires. My message to them is, go on whining and complaining, because I'm not here to build your empire. I'm here to build homes for Canadians. And that will be the choice, Madam Speaker, in a housing tax election. Either the NDP Liberals who fund local bureaucracies or common sense Conservatives who axe the tax to build the homes. Thank you.
Questions and comments, the Honourable Member for St. John Rothsay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the Leader of the Opposition for his speech. And, Madam Speaker, as I say often, I am from the beautiful riding of St. John Rothsay, where the Leader has visited frequently recently. But one thing that I do want to, Madam Speaker, is the pride I have in our programs, like the Housing Accelerator, like the Rapid Housing Initiative, like the Co-Investment Fund, that have benefited my riding greatly. But one thing that's certainly come to notice of late is the Leader of the Opposition calling mayors across this country incompetent, amongst other things. So my question to the Leader of the Opposition is this: will you stop calling mayors across this country incompetent, and is the mayor of my riding of St. John incompetent? Thank you.
Well, Leader of the Opposition.
Probably.
I don't know his mayor, so I can't comment on that, but I know his mayor's MP is incompetent, Mr. Speaker. And we know that because since he became the MP, housing costs have doubled in St. John. He wasn't able to get the energy use pipeline approved. He squeals away that he doesn't like the carbon tax, but then he votes to quadruple that same tax. I don't know if that's duplicity or incompetence, but probably a combination of the two. Now, one mayor was complaining the other day that I said, this is Mayor in Aurora, said he wants me to give the GST to him. off of new homes. Can you imagine that? He said, do away with this idea of axing the GST on new homes and just give him the money. So every time someone buys a home in Aurora, the GST would go to the mayor instead. If that were going to help build homes, Madam Speaker, it already would have. His revenues are up 192%, while population growth and inflation has been 62% in the last 15 years. And what has that done? It's driven up more housing costs. We need less money for politicians and less taxes for home buyers.
Pierre's just getting warmed up, folks. He's just getting started for the day.
Madam Speaker, I think it's quite sad that the Leader of the Opposition is lowering himself to the kinds of things he just said to the Liberal member. I would like to remind him that there is nothing that shows that eliminating this 5% tax will actually lower housing costs. For example, since September 2023, there hasn't been GST on rental housing starts. And yet, despite that, there has been zero measurable impact on the cost of housing. Thank you. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Well, my colleague has said that scrapping the GST on apartments has not yet reduced the cost of homes. That's because houses are not apartments. There's a difference between an apartment and a house. So eliminating the tax on apartments will reduce the costs of apartments, and eliminating GST on houses will reduce the costs of houses. Does that help my colleague?
Hamilton Centre.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. You know, last week, the leader of the Conservative Party actually told on himself. He stood up and he called a picket line a rally for striking workers.
He's wearing a watermelon
and yet
pin.
he cosplays as though he's a working-class hero. So my question for you to him is quite simple. Is the leader of the official opposition still adamant about turning back our labor laws and making Canada a right-to-work nation, or will he stand with New Democrats and force the Liberals to end the Section 107 ministerial directions that undermine charter rights and privileges for unions and workers?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, I'll answer his questions very directly. We are not going to be bringing in a right-to-work law. And as the second question is, will we stand with the New Democrats for unions? Well, that's exactly what I'm asking him to do today. We have a motion in the House of Commons today that condemns this government for robbing workers of the right to strike and votes non-confidence in the government that the NDP leader has said is greedy, corporate-driven, and anti-worker. So we're ready to stand up today in that vote. The question is, will the NDP stand by its own words, stand by workers, or will they sell out once again for this Prime Minister?
Resuming debate, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Speaker, for recognizing me and giving me an opportunity to speak on this motion. And I will start by saying at the outset that I'm glad that we're actually having a debate on a substantive motion, and I will talk a little bit more about it. But also to let you know that I'll be splitting my time with member from King Hans on this important issue. And so I'm glad that we're having a debate on a substantive issue around how do we build more homes in Canada. Now, I will say to you that we have that challenge because of the fact that Canada is growing. We're growing in size. We're 40 million people now, and I'm one of those people who say that that's a good thing.
No, it's too fast.
As a country,
it's not sustainable.
As we have an aging population, and we need to make sure that we have more young people who are working in our country and are able to populate our country from coast to coast to coast. But of course, with that comes challenges on the infrastructure. We obviously have to keep pace with the growing population. We have to build more homes. We have to build more roads, public transit. We need to make sure that the infrastructure necessary to serve these homes, like water and sewer and electricity, is there as well, which of course all of it costs money and it takes time to build. Now, how do we go around doing that is a really important question, and I think that's what we are debating here through this particular opposition to motion. And I will put aside all the name calling and all the personal insults. I think that's beneath this place, and I think it's beneath all of us. I want to give credit where credit is due, that at least for the very first time, the Conservative Party on this substantive issue has put forward a policy idea. Whether you agree or disagree, that's obviously up to all of us, but I'm glad to see that they've actually put forward an idea of eliminating GST from home purchases. I believe is under $1 million. Now, I believe that that's an idea that merits a debate, but from my perspective, it's really not going to help build more homes, and therefore I will be voting against this motion. But let me lay out my reasons for it. As I see it, what's being proposed is basically to cut 5% of the GST from all, I believe, new homes that are being built at $1 million or less. But that's what it does, and I think, according to the Conservative method, we'll save about $5,000. It does not create any incentive whatsoever to build more homes. Whether they are homes to own, whether there are homes to rent, definitely what it does not do is create any incentive whatsoever to build homes that are affordable for people who are not able to rent a home or own a home and need some sort of a subsidy, some sort of support in order to have a roof over their heads. And so that particular element is missing. In fact, we know what we have heard from the Leader of Opposition just right now, that they have said that they will cancel all programs that exist, all kinds of supports and funding that exists that is going to help build affordable homes that we are seeing across the country. And I will, in a very quick moment, will speak to affordable housing that is being built in my community of Ottawa Centre alone. But in their proposal, they will basically cut the GST, and at the same time, they will cut all programs that allows for municipalities to build the infrastructure that is necessary. Water, sewer, electricity, all those things that are necessary to then actually make sure that these homes, people can live in these homes, can actually use that home. House without a plumbing is going to be, or without electricity, is hard to really make it a home. So that is a very significant challenge that we are seeing, and that's why you're seeing a lot of other levels of government, provinces and municipalities, by the way, who play a bigger role in building homes, opposed to their idea. They don't support that idea because they see the challenge it causes. Now, the Leader of the Opposition can make it all about how he doesn't want to support politicians creating empires, etc., etc. He, as we know, has no experience in building anything. When he was Minister of Housing, I think he's 6 affordable homes that he was able to build, and that's not a record to be extremely proud of. But if you talk to mayors, if you talk to municipalities like right here in the City of Ottawa, who are responsible for the rules and all the work that happens to build homes, they will tell you that a simple cut in the GST is not sufficient to build the kind of homes we need. Because if it was sufficient, this idea would have been implemented some time ago. Not to mention the hypocrisy we're seeing from the Conservatives, because when we brought in, and the member from a bloc mentioned that earlier, when we block in as a government getting rid of GST from purpose-built rental, what did the Conservatives do? They voted against that idea. They voted against it. So they cannot be speaking and acting from both sides of their mouths. On one hand, they thought that was not good enough, that we should not be cutting GST from purpose-built rental, but now think that they've got the best idea in place and that everybody should align behind that idea. So what are we doing? What we are doing is we're trying to do a mix of both those ideas. On one hand, we have cut GST from purpose-built rentals. So
is he trying to filibuster? This is kind of yapping in circles.
Rental properties, and in fact, we're seeing the result of that. We're seeing rents coming down across the country. But at the same time, Speaker, we are creating incentives for municipalities to enable to build more homes. And that is the essence of the Housing Accelerator Fund. What we have done through that fund is 2 things. One, we have using their money to build more affordable housing in our communities, in our municipalities, all the municipalities, and we know there's about 15, 16 Conservative MPs who've been lobbying the Minister of Housing over time, and I can give you the full list if you want to, Speaker, but I don't want to take away from my important time, who have written letters to the Minister of Housing saying, please give that money to our municipalities because they need those dollars in order to support, to build more affordable housing in their respective communities. Like right here in Ottawa, for example, if you look at my community of Ottawa Centre, we are seeing affordable housing being built at Rochester Heights, which is, maybe 10 minutes drive from here. We're seeing a whole new village, we call it the Gladstone Village, which is starting to develop, that is being supported through the Housing Accelerator Fund. Or most recently, we made an announcement at Le Breton Flens called Le Breton Dream with Multi-Faith Housing Initiative, where affordable housing along with for-profit housing going in side by side. We're talking about, at least in my riding alone, Speaker, about 1,000 affordable units that are starting to get built because of the Housing Accelerator Fund. That would have not happened. These are homes for real people, people who can only afford market rate, people who cannot afford market rate. These are people who will be able to call downtown Ottawa their home. But that would have not happened if we had not given $176 million to City of Ottawa. But what's the second thing we're doing through the Housing Accelerator Fund? We also said, hey city, hey municipalities, if you need that money, you need to change your rules to allow for more density. You need to get rid of rules that say, not in my backyard. What we need is for you to allow for, at the least, for example, 4 units per lot. Now remember, we're the federal government, Speaker, so we don't have any authority. The province does. They can change the Planning Act, but we as the federal government does not have any authority to go and change municipal rules as to how much housing they should allow for. But through the Housing Accelerator Fund, we had created that incentive for municipalities to change the rules so that we can allow for more density. And that's exactly what we are saying right now. Not only we are able to build more affordable homes, we are for developers, and ask any builder, any developer who likes more density, we have required municipalities to change their rules so that they can create and build more housing. That is smart policy, Madam Speaker, and that is why the approach that we have put forward is actually paying dividends. We are starting to see more housing starts as a result. We're starting to see more affordable housing being result. The solution that is being put forward, worthy of debate.
So
I'm
one MP
put an idea
from every
together,
party
but
has
it's
10 minutes to
not going
talk.
solve the problem,
And this is why he's trying to fill his full 10 minutes.
It's great for the leader of the opposition to give fiery speeches and do his really bad acting. I think he needs to get some lessons there. But it's not going to build the kind of housing at the magnitude of housing we needed. And that's for that reason, Speaker, I will be voting against that motion.
Wow.
Comments.
Thank you for
Josie,
laying
come
that
on
out.
back. The Honourable Deputy House Leader.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I listened with interest to the comments that the Parliamentary Secretary just made, because he told a much different story than what the Leader of the Opposition is saying. Leader of the Opposition is being very accusatory that there's bureaucracy and red tape at city halls, which is preventing building from occurring. And nobody, I think, is really denying that. And the example that he gave of a developer talking about going back and a planning application had to be reviewed and then reviewed again, nobody's denying that. But what we're saying is that the Housing Accelerator Fund is specifically designed. I know in Kingston, the money that was given to the municipality was tied to reducing that red tape to ensure that more would get built quicker, to reduce exactly those kind of problems that he indicated. I'm wondering if the Parliamentary Secretary can provide some of his thoughts into that, and why it's so important, and more importantly, why there's over 15 Conservatives who want and have been advocating for this money for their ridings. Clearly, they must see that it works. At least the correspondence that they sent to the Minister indicated that they thought that that money would work for the intended purpose. Otherwise, why would they be asking for it?
Good point.
The Honourable Parliamentary
What a
Secretary.
dork.
Thank you very much, Speaker. I want to thank the member from the Kingston Islands. I think he's absolutely right, and he cited Kingston as an example. I can cite Ottawa as an example. In fact, I wonder, the leader of the opposition, the member for Carlton, he and I share the same city as home, whether he's spoken with our mayor, Mark Sutcliffe, about this issue and what Mayor Sutcliffe's response would be. Because the money that we have given, for example, very small part of that money is going towards streamlining the entire process of approving projects, which builders and developers actually want. They want a simpler process, and we are able to use that money to create that incentive, not only to change the bylaws, to build more density, so that on a lot you're not seeing just one house going, but up to 4 houses going as a right by default, not to mention even higher density on bigger size of lots, so that you can leverage the infrastructure that's available. But then a larger proportion of that money is going towards actually building affordable housing. That's the point. We are able to accomplish it both. What he is doing essentially, in many sense, by cutting the GST only, is raising the margin of profit for developers, because they're not going to pass those savings to the consumers.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Bruce Grey, Owen Sound.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. I got 2 quick questions and a comment for the member opposite. So he was expounding on the importance of the Housing Accelerator Fund. It's supposed to be an equitable fund out to all ridings across the country. I'd just like him to name one Conservative-held riding in Ontario that got a single penny of the Housing Accelerator Fund. Number 2, because he thinks this is such a great fund, how many houses have been built in his riding with the Housing Accelerator Fund? And my last point, Madam Speaker, is just a comment. He mentioned that our proposal, the Leader of the Opposition's proposal, that it will save $5,000 on $1 million house. 5% of $1 million is $50,000, not $5,000. Thanks, Madam Speaker.
Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Speaker. I thank the member opposite for asking the question. I enjoy working with him, and I appreciate his public service. And I'll say to him, there's a lot of examples, and I can take him on a tour one of these weekends if he likes to in my riding. I mentioned already Gladstone Village, which is right on Somerset and Preston. You will see cranes are up. That housing, affordable housing, is going because of Housing Accelerator Fund. You can go on Rochester and Gladstone by Adult High School. You will see there's housing that's getting built. Phase 1 is already up. Phase 2 is going up. That Housing Accelerator Fund. I can take you to LeBreton Flag just down the road. There's 2 cranes up right now, and there's 2 towers that's going up. That's called Dream LeBreton. And Multi-Faith Housing Initiative is the not-for-profit housing provider. That's Housing Accelerator Fund. If you like, I can go through many other lists of actual housing, and I'll get you a list of all the Conservative ridings that are benefiting from Housing Accelerator Fund as well.
Questions et commentaires, l'honorable.
The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Terrebonne, rather.
Holy smokes, man.
No, Repentigny. I was right.
Let's stay awake, folks.
I
know it's boring.
Sorry. The most beautiful riding of them all, Madam Speaker. Well, there's a proposal right now from the Conservatives to eliminate GST on new home builds, on condos. Well, the question that we need to ask is, will this actually contribute to the increase in demand for social housing? And I've understood, that the Liberals have talked about many of their programs, the Accelerator Fund, etc. But one of the problems with these programs is that we're not able to see the results because it takes a very long time, because the federal government has decided to invest, but with 56,000 conditions. So, this should be Quebec's jurisdiction and municipal jurisdiction. So how can the member answer for these Liberal government strategies? How can they suggest that they are more efficient than something like cutting the GST? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Opposite for her question, and I will say to you that we have such a big challenge right now in terms of building housing across this country that we need all three orders of government working together. She's absolutely right. Of course, rules around how housing is built, the actual housing is a provincial and municipal issue, but we are working with provincial and municipal governments to create those incentives so that we can increase the supply to reduce the demand on housing.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Kings Heads.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We're here today to discuss an Opposition Day motion from the Conservative Party in relation to housing. And I will say I welcome the opportunity to rise here in this place and talk about the importance of housing, because this is a national conversation right now. And I want to give some context to my own riding in Kings Heads. I was elected in 2019, and Madam Speaker, I remember going to communities, particularly in rural parts of my riding in Hants County and Kings County, and you would have conversations. You'd knock on the door and people would say, Cody, look, I'm worried that I'm not going to be able to actually sell my home. It's been on the market for a year or two. No one seems to want to buy it. I think, fortunately, we in Nova Scotia, at least in the Annapolis Valley and in Hants County, that's no longer a problem because there has been a growth and an interest in people who want to live in rural Nova Scotia, I would say rural Atlantic Canada, and particularly during the height of the pandemic and afterwards, we saw large migrations across Canada, people from Ontario, people from Western Canada that wanted to come live in Nova Scotia for the quality of life that our communities offer. And that is a very good thing, because our province for years has been chasing and desiring and wanting to welcome newcomers to our province. It may sound like a very modest number, Madam Speaker. We just eclipsed 1 million people about a year and a half ago in our province. That had been a number that projections were actually showing our population was going to be decreasing. So I think as Nova Scotians, we should be welcoming the fact that people want to live in our communities. I live in East Hants, one of the fastest growing municipalities in Atlantic Canada. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we have the proper housing and infrastructure and social services to keep pace. And this is what this conversation is about today. The Conservatives have put on the table a suggestion that the government should move forward with a GST cut for new built homes in the country up to $1 million. And I'll be honest, in and of itself, that idea is not a terrible one. But the catch is what the fine print that the Conservatives don't put in the Opposition Day motion, which they've said outside of this place, which is the way that they would go about paying for that type of expenditure would to actually be to cut the programs that are driving supply. And I think it's extremely important for Canadians at home to understand that when you rob Peter to pay Paul, that's not getting us any further ahead, is it? And in fact, it's actually narrowing the amount of Canadians that could benefit from a housing initiative. Because, Madam Speaker, there are a lot of people, I'm one of the younger members of Parliament in this House, there are a lot of people in my age bracket that are looking to buy their first home, looking to get in and start a family. They may not be in a position to buy or purchase a brand new built home. And so one of the things so far in the debate that I have not heard the Conservatives address is why are we going so narrow just on newly built homes? Why is this not an affordability measure that's extended all the way across? And why are they proposing to actually get rid of the programs that are increasing supply that could actually help support this initiative in the first place? Because by stunting the ability to actually build the supply, they're narrowing the...
All right, folks, I just got word that they are going to be filibustering pretty much until question period starts. And so we're not going to end the stream. Don't worry about that. What we are going to do, though, is we're going to take a little bit of a break from the House, the Parliament, and we're going to take a look at some news stories so we can be all caught up on the news, because there's a lot happening, not only in Canada, but also around the world. So I'm just pulling them up right now. I recommend that you guys stick around for this. I wouldn't recommend that you guys leave and come back, because I also have Parliament pulled up on another monitor, and if something does happen, I've also got people hitting me up on the phone right now, so if something does happen immediately, we will be taking a look at that and switching right away. But in the meantime, we're gonna get away from the filibustering. They're not doing nothing, all right? So anyone say, oh, put it back at Parliament. Listen, if you want to listen to the Liberals ramble, feel free to do that. You can go to Parleville, you can go to CPAC, that's okay. That's okay. You can go listen to Justin Trudeau talk. It's okay. They're not talking about anything important. We are actually going to be looking at stuff that's important, such as the Quebec Premier. Did you know that the Quebec Premier is putting a ban to public prayer in Quebec? Did you know about that? Chances are you wouldn't have unless you were watching this live stream. So we're going to be taking a look at that along with a couple other things. All right. So don't go nowhere. Don't go nowhere because I've got everything ready to go here. I'm just going to read off a couple of super chats, folks. All right. What do we got? What are we dealing with here? Let's see. Nextler with $4.99 American saying this may be an odd question, but thought I'd ask, when did you start keeping up with politics like this? Or have you always watched this stuff? I started paying attention to politics when I had to. Simple as that. When I had to. Past few years, I suppose. Jordan English with a 5 saying, I'm not going anywhere. I have my coffee. Like and subscribe. That's right, folks. We got 5,000 people, just under 5,000 people. Let's see if we can get some more likes on the stream, huh? Smash the like button. Let's get things going. Let's keep the momentum. Let's keep the energy, because this is gonna be a long day. It's gonna be a long stream. Whether you want to leave or not, it's still gonna be a long day. It's Monday, and they're doing a voting on confidence. So you might as well tune in for the rest of the stream and see what the heck is happening in Canada. David Thomas with the 1111. Good morning. Just a little support for the channel. Thank you, Wizard. I appreciate that. Thanks, buddy. That's very nice of you. All right. Let's see this story here. So now we're getting into the nitty-gritty stuff. I can't make this up, but there's been an awful amount of noticeable public prayer not by Christians in Canada. And with the rise of the Palestinian protests that are very dangerous and very chaotic taking place in Quebec, you have the Quebec Premier is now issuing a statement saying that he wants to ban people from public prayer, from prayer in public spaces, which is probably going to get spun into a super, super progressive media tour. But this is wild. I never thought anybody in Canada had the guts to say something like this. But here we go. Let's take a look.
I think that people are a bit fed up to see that.
Premier François Legault says Quebecers should not be exposed to people praying in public. The comment came during his year-end press conference, where Legault spoke about his two main priorities, protecting the economy and protecting Quebec's identity.
We have to make sure that we protect our language and our values. And in our values, I include secularism and equality between men and women.
Legault says his government is studying all options, including using the notwithstanding clause to ban public prayers.
You should pray in a place that is for praying, but in parks, public parks or public streets, we'll look at what we can do, but that's not what we want.
Sometimes it makes me feel that he doesn't want us here.
Canadian Council of Muslim Women Vice President Shaheen Ashraf says prayer is personal and adds she doesn't understand why it makes others uncomfortable.
I'm not going to be disturbing anyone. I will just be concentrating on my prayer, which again, I will reiterate that it takes like 4 or 5 minutes, and then go about my business.
Rabbi Ruben Pupko says it hardly affects the Jewish community because prayers take place almost exclusively in a synagogue. But he believes the move is in response to protests surrounding the conflict in the Middle East.
Unfortunately, given that some groups have exploited the religious excuse for their rhetoric and for their gatherings, this is the inevitable result.
It comes on the same day Education Minister Bernard Drinville says he will table a bill to strengthen secularism in schools.
We have to look at ways to strengthen secularism into our school system to address these issues of religious behaviors.
Drinville says more cases have been brought to his attention, including another this week at St. Maxime in Laval. The Education Ministry is currently investigating 17 Quebec schools where it's alleged that state secularism is not being respected. Olivia O'Malley, CTV News, Quebec City.
Let me know what you guys think about that, because it seems like it's only a push towards certain religions. I mean, are people that do Catholic prayers in public, is that going to have the same reaction? Christian prayers? I don't think so. I don't think it's as frequent and as, I don't know how to say this, as big of a deal when it's Christians praying. It's more like in a park, that's all, hold hands and say a prayer, not literally in the middle of a road. But no matter how you look at it, that's what a church is for. That's what a place of worship, a temple, a church, however you want to look at it, is for. So let me know what you guys think down below in the comments about that one. Next up here, we're going to take a look at this part of Pierre Poilievre's speech that he gave the other day.
Pierre Poilievre says his team is putting Canada first in the fight against Donald Trump's tariffs.
Every single Conservative would tell every single American that a tariff on Canada is a bad idea.
This weekend, Conservative MP Jamil Jivani met with Vice President-elect J.D. Vance in Washington. But Jivani didn't confirm if they talked tariffs at the dinner. In a statement writing, the Vice President-elect knows my views on these matters well. I've shared feedback from Canadian businesses and workers about the impact tariffs would have on our economy. Poilievre says he hasn't talked to anyone in the Trump administration on the issue.
I haven't.
This morning, Trump railed against his country's trade deficit with Canada, border security, and called tariffs a powerful political tool that he loved.
We're subsidizing Canada to the tune of over $100 billion a year. We're subsidizing Mexico for almost $300 billion. We shouldn't be subsidizing. Why are we subsidizing these countries? If we're going to subsidize them, let them become a state.
The message in stark contrast to that of the outgoing Biden administration.
This is our #1 trading relationship in the world. It is a trading relationship that is the envy of the world. And the last thing you want to do is to put things in place that make it harder.
Meanwhile, new polling shows 63% of Canadians at least partially believe Trump's tariff threats.
Donald Trump operates in a disruptive manner. That's how he tries to gain the upper advantage when it comes to negotiations and stuff like this. The big issue here is uncertainty.
We're learning more tonight about François Legault's meeting with Donald Trump in Paris yesterday. The Quebec Premier and U.S. President-elect talked tariffs and border issues. Meanwhile, Legault also met with Elon Musk to discuss U.S.-Canada trade and electric vehicles. Heather.
Colton, thank you.
I absolutely believe Mr. President Trump. I don't think that he's bluffing at all. I think that it's a very real and tangible thing that he could do. And even if it hurts Americans financially in the American economy, he's willing to lay down the hammer. He has to. He can't go back on it now. He made the threat. He's going to double down, right? 25. Did I say 25? I meant 50, right? Like, yes, we should be believing Donald Trump. But let me know what you guys think down below in the comments about that one. Next up here, we've got a poll that shows Canadians would hesitate to buy U.S. goods if tariffs go into effect. I think that with our dollar being so shite and with the additional taxes of tariffs, essentially, I think, this is a very real thing. People will not want to buy things in America. People will not want to travel as much in America.
Impacting Canadians' feelings about buying U.S. products.
CTV's Colton Prail has more on this story. Colton, good morning. Good to see you. So in the new Nano CTV poll, how are Canadians reacting to Trump's trade threat of a 25% tariff on Canadian goods?
Canadians do think that these tariffs are coming. They are taking Trump at his word, and we're seeing that play out similarly in how they plan on responding. The majority of Canadians say they're much less likely to buy American products as a result of these tariffs, about 51%, and an additional 14 say they're at least somewhat less likely to buy American products. So while these tariffs we know will have an impact on the Canadian economy and certainly on the American economy, there could be a knock-on carryover effect in consumer behavior change that adds another little wrinkle that the Trump administration will have to consider before the imposition of these tariffs. The big question, though, is whether or not we'll see enough consumer behavior changes that line up with what they're saying in this polling. A lot of Canadians, for example, aren't always aware of which products they're buying that are made in the U.S. because there is such a large quantity that come into Canada from America, especially when it comes to fruits and vegetables and things like that.
And is our market cold and even big enough to make a dent or an impact on the American side of the equation here? But the big question, I suppose, really is, so what do Canadians think our government should be doing about these tariff threats? We've seen Trudeau, for example, go and visit Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, this is the big question. How do you deal with it? What do you do next? And so there are two different issues at play here, right? There's the border. There's also the trade deficit. You can hear Trump talking about it in his most recent interview as a subsidy. That's not really what it is. He's referring to the fact that the U.S. is importing more Canadian products than exporting to Canada. And so there's a couple ways that Canada can deal with it. They can redo the CUSMA agreement, the Canada, U.S., Mexico Free Trade Agreement, and about 1 in 2 Canadians do want to see us speed up that negotiation. It's currently set for 2026. The other thing you can do, though, is you can try to negotiate your way out of these tariffs or do retaliatory tariffs. And again,
I would not
we're talking about
that.
1 in 2 Canadians just about would prefer to see a negotiated agreement rather than going with retaliatory tariffs, where about 1/3 of Canadians would like to see us fire back. Interestingly, even though the degree of severity of the tariffs we're talking about is very different from, say, 2017 when he imposed those tariffs before, the reaction from Canadians is very, very similar. We're talking a percentage point or 2 difference in the amount of people who'd like to see us negotiate our way out versus fire back with tariffs of our own.
I do not think that Canada has enough bargaining power, enough leverage to be able to negotiate like that. I really don't. It doesn't matter if Canada is the largest exporter to America. That doesn't matter. We border America. We're protected by America until we aren't. For crying out loud, we haven't been paying our bills for the defense budget. And I've made a video about that a couple months ago or a month ago showing that Trump said, without saying Canada, he implied that it was Canada. If Russia's about to invade, we're going to look and see if they paid the bills, right? And of course, it's talking about Canada. We've been dropping the ball in so many different ways. So no, I don't think having retaliatory tariffs is the right response. But again, I'm not a politician. I'm just watching this just like a Canadian on the sidelines going, I don't think I want to be a part of this. I don't consent to any of this, but let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. Next up, we're taking a look at this strange video. So apparently Fiji, that's right, Fiji, not the water, but the place, has nothing better to do than to say that they need Canada, of all places in the world, to help fight against the weather. That's what Fiji's saying. That's what's in this video. Let's take a look.
Province on Fiji's largest island, 300 people live in just over 40 houses along the water. It's among the many Pacific Island communities that have been dealing with the impacts of climate change, including rising sea levels.
I go out to my communities and then you see that the graveyards are washing out. And we had to forcefully relocate families because the waters are coming under their houses.
Levenia Naivalu's island has seen a lot of changes over the decades, including many communities either already relocated or preparing to relocate. She says it hurts her to see it happening.
We are not the ones who are dumping nuclear wastes. We are not the ones who are building the tallest buildings. I mean, here we are victims of the situation, victims of climate change, victims of their wrongdoing, big people's wrongdoing. Why do we deserve it?
Canada is a contributor to the climate change impacting Fiji. This year's Climate Change Performance Index ranks Canada 62nd out of 67 countries for climate mitigation performance, making no progress from last year. As extreme weather becomes more frequent globally, it's developing countries like here in Fiji that are most affected and least able to afford consequences. With 90% of Pacific Islanders living within 5 kilometers of the coast, the impacts of climate change are an everyday reality.
The decisions agreed at the global level is...
I think that we're heading into a recession because Luxembourg. I think Luxembourg owes us a lot of money, or else we're going to head into a recession that is 100% attributed to specifically Luxembourg, not surrounding countries, but only Luxembourg. Do you understand how ridiculous what I just said is? Like, that's insane. The fact that Fiji's blaming Canada for stuff, bro, you're on the other side of the world. What are you talking about? What the hell are you talking about? This doesn't make any sense. This has to, like, how much money are they getting? There's probably a government grant or something that goes to them, and then in return, in the fine print, it says all you got to do is talk to cameras and then blame Canada, and you'll keep getting more money. And they're like, what? How does that make sense? We talk shit about your country and you give us money? Canadian government's like, yeah, that's exactly what we want you to do. That's what this feels like. This doesn't make any sense. I don't understand it. I don't understand it, and I don't agree with it. And speaking of something I don't understand, this next story is crazy. Bananas, even. So there's a Canada-wide arrest warrant issued for a former Calgary police officer. This is the first time I'm watching this blind with you. First time ever that I'm watching this news story. This is crazy. Here we go.
Words out of Chief Mark Neufeld's mouth this afternoon. Embarrassing, before going into detail about the 16-month investigation by the CPS Professional Standards section into the actions of 51-year-old Brett Singer. Now, this all started when an initial complainant came forward in July of last year, saying Singer had contacted her in a personal and romantic context after he responded to a call for service involving her. And that complainant had heard similar stories from other women before coming to police. And the alleged offenses occurred between 2008 and 2023, nearly all of Singer's 16-year tenure with the CPS. And the police says Singer inappropriately used police databases to find out how to contact the women. He was first suspended with pay in January of this year, then without pay in September, before quitting the force soon after.
The risk was assessed as high right from the beginning of receipt of this complaint, and that's why we immediately removed him from public-facing duty. We then continually assessed the evidence, and as more victims became aware to us, we escalated our restrictions on this member.
This type of behavior certainly does undermine trust and confidence with the public in a very serious way, and it does. It actually runs contrary to the work that the members of the Calgary Police Service do in the community every day, and so yes, it is demoralizing for sure.
Police believe Singer left the country soon after resigning and hasn't returned. Now, as you mentioned, he's wanted on a Canada-wide warrant on one charge of breach of trust and another charge of misuse of a computer system. And guys, given the decade-and-a-half timeline of these allegations, Chief Neufeld believes there could be more victims out there who've experienced a similar situation. Anyone who has believed they've been contacted inappropriately by Singer or any other CPS officer, for that matter, is asked to call the Professional Standards section.
All right. So there you go. That's kind of crazy, huh? Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments about that. That's never good when the police do big no-nos. It definitely undermines how people view the police. And in a time right now where people are just so on edge about police in general, like I used to trust the police. I used to think that they were there to serve and protect. And that's just how I grew up. And I was in the military, and I thought it was an honorable job. And that might actually still kind of be true at surface level. But when you look at how the police just follow orders and don't use critical thinking for certain things, like what happened during the most, historic peaceful protests in Canadian history, shit like that is like, yeah, I don't know if I trust the police. And then how they handle all these, out of control Palestine protests, right? That happened in like Montreal. They literally had firecrackers thrown at them and fireworks thrown at them, and they backed off in riot gear. They got beat up by just like whatever protesters. That's crazy. The police in riot gear got beat up by protesters. I don't understand it. I don't understand where policing is heading in Canada. But that's my opinion, and I'd love to know your guys's. Next up, we're going to take a look here at this clip. This is by True North. This is kind of scary. The national president of the Customs and Immigration Union, Mark Webber, reveals that the CBSA inspects less than 1% of imports. Huh. Yeah, no wonder our borders are messed up.
Let's talk about searching equipment, because we've talked about people, but I was surprised to learn, and perhaps this makes me very naive, but that the CBSA doesn't have the capacity in terms of officers or technology, for example, to search the vast majority of containers that are coming into the Port of Vancouver. And we know that's a huge fentanyl entry port. Can you talk to us a little bit about what the ability of the CBSA is to seize and investigate in particular drugs in Canada when they're coming in?
Yeah, I mean, we do have good intelligence. We work very hard at it. Again, it's simply a matter of more. We need more people. We need more equipment. We search less than 1% of what comes into Canada. Modes like rail.
Less than 1%.
Rail, we don't do at all. We don't look at whatsoever. We don't know what comes in via train. Again, we don't have the infrastructure. Wow. We don't have the people to actually do that work.
I just wanted to ask you to go back on rail. With rail, is that an inability to search just the products coming across, or is that people as well?
Could be either. Could products, people. We don't have the infrastructure to do those searches. There's plans underway to allow us to do that work on the U.S. side because there are ports where they have the infrastructure to do that. But again, that's really something Canada should be investing in.
There you go. So you're wondering why our country's, an absolute mess right now. Shit like that. That doesn't help, right? Things are slipping through the cracks. The crack is 99% wide. Less than 1% of things actually get scanned like that. See, I'm not necessarily advocating that everything should be scanned, but I feel like 1% of things that's pretty low. There's got to be a more efficient way of doing things and preserving our borders and our integrity here in Canada. Like, people can literally just ship things into this country and it's fine. It's not fine. It's illegal. Things that they shouldn't, but it happens and they can get away with it because it might not actually get caught. So no matter how much, TV programs Canada likes to, invest money in, I don't know what that TV show is called, Border Patrol or something, where you literally see CBSA officers at the Canadian-US border and they're just watching people arrive from Jamaica, stoned out of their mind, something like that. And then they go through the bags, whatever that show is called. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Stuff like that. That doesn't mean anything. You can watch a show, but in reality, we just heard from one of the guys themselves saying, yeah, we're really dropping the ball. So let me know what you guys think down below in the comments about that one. Next up, we're going to take a look here at Ontario. The Premier of Ontario, Premier Ford, some people are actually speculating that he's going to call an election this spring. 'Tis the season of elections, right? That's some good news.
Politicians at Queen's Park are abuzz with speculation that Premier Doug Ford will call an early election. Well, there are several signs that Ford wants to send Ontarians to the polls before the next scheduled election in June of 2026. Well, some say the government's fast tracking of several bills is an indication it wants to clear the legislative decks before a spring election. Others point to the year-end deadline Ford gave his caucus members to decide if they'll run for re-election. Well, there's also the more than $103 million spent on government ads in the last fiscal year, more than 3 times the year before. Well, joining us live now with more on the growing speculation of an early election is CTV political commentator Scott Reid. Always great to chat. Scott, given all those indications and things that I just mentioned, what's your take on this? You think he'll call an early election?
Oh, I think we're going to get the strangest Christmas present under the tree this year, Ontario voters. I think Premier Ford is going to deliver an election probably at the end of February for early April. And you laid out a whole ton of clues, Jamie. I'll give you 2 more. Polls in Ontario and polls federally. The polls federally show that the Prime Minister is running 20 to 25 points behind. What does that mean? It means that there's a reasonable fear that notwithstanding his protests that he was going to stay in place, at some point he might quit. Doug Ford doesn't want to run against anyone other than Justin Trudeau. He doesn't want to run against Pierre Poilievre. He doesn't want to run against Merritt Stiles. He doesn't want to run against Bonnie Crombie. He wants to run against the least popular politician in the country. He wants to run against Justin Trudeau. And if he's going to do it, he's got to get it in quick. Second poll number that we should pay attention to, the Premier's own numbers, running about 43%. And the opposition is dead even split between the Liberals and the NDP. Liberals running around 25, NDP at 21. That is the perfect recipe for a majority re-election campaign. And the Premier wants to bank that result before there's any chance it could go away.
Well, you've been a strategic advisor and a political advisor. I mean, it seems that all the signs are there that there's blood in the water. So does it just make sense to pounce while all of these ducks are in a row?
Here's the risk. Here's the risk, and it's not to be turned your back on. The risk is that voters will conclude Doug Ford is calling an election very early, not because it's in their interest, but because it's in his interest. Not because he wants to do something for voters, but because he wants voters to do something for him. And that can be a cancerous logic if you're looking to get reelected. So he's got to worry about that risk. He's got to worry that he just looks like he's being self-interested. And I think for Ford, that means he's going to have to start to lay track. Maybe as early as this news conference today, when he's going to get asked about this, he's going to have to start to lay track as to why an election might be necessary. What would cause it to go to the polls? What would cause the government to go to the polls? And it can't just be because he thinks he can get reelected. That's the risk for him. But on balance, man, it looks good. You want to strike while the iron's hot.
Well, he's also, started to delve into municipal issues that have upset, some portion of the electorate. But there are a lot of people that are fully supportive of him going in and telling Toronto, you can't put in that bike lane or you can't have that supervised drug injection site. And that's sitting well with some people. But when he starts floating around massive, huge ideas like building a tunnel under the 401, I'm wondering what's your take on this? How do you think that's going to sit with people? Because given the disaster,
they should absolutely do that. For the most part, I guess I could say I was actually raised in Toronto. I lived in Toronto a good part of my adult life. And I mean, the traffic was bad then and it's horrible now. I see videos now. And if and when I actually go back and I visit, I got lots of friends and family that still live in Toronto. And it's an absolute mess. It's a disaster. I mean, we see it all the time in videos that circulate online. But for those that are actually experiencing it, it is just a shit show. You live on one side of Toronto and you got to commute to the other side and you got a vehicle. Man, you're talking like you're spending a quarter of your life in a vehicle just traveling from and to work. Like, it's insane. So building a tunnel, yeah, absolutely. It's going to be very expensive though. It's going to be very expensive. I mean, is it going to topple any of the other infrastructure? I don't know. I think Toronto's a mess. So, like, Toronto wasn't designed to the infrastructure for it. It's not keeping up. The actual pillars of Toronto, the pipes, the sewer, everything. It wasn't designed to have this rapid of a growth. And so everything was built a long time ago. Right? All the sewers, all the piping, all of that stuff. And where they are now with a super huge surge in population. I mean, it's an absolute disaster. That's why you're seeing all these floods happen, right? And they're like, oh my God, climate change. No, the drains, bro. The drains are not working properly. The drains are not working. I feel like I'm in an episode of Seinfeld. The drains, Jerry, the drains. Come on. So should they build a tunnel? I mean, sure, why not? Give them a tunnel. Give them a tunnel under the 401.
Disaster that we've been going through with the with Metrolinx and just the overall gridlock. Do you think people will have the appetite for a big grand project like that?
Yeah, I think the magic tunnel might have been a bit of an improvisation. I'm not sure we'll hear a ton about that again. But look, whether it's picking fights with municipal leaders over safe injection sites and bike lanes, or whether it's barging into the federal agenda, talking about Trump and tariffs, I think both of those are actually clues, again, that the premier intends to run, because both of those are issues where he thinks he can align himself with a majority of voters, at least for sure a majority of his voters. And so I look at those situations, I look at those issues, and I see hints that the premier is trying to use those issues as justification for an election call in late February, as compared to worries that maybe he shouldn't, that these issues are divisive. I think he likes exactly how those issues play for him.
CTV political commentator Scott Reed, always great to chat, my friend. Have a great day.
There you go, right? I mean, is it going to fix it? Who knows? Are the tunnels going to be used and abused by crackheads? Yeah, likely. Absolutely. Like, something horrible is going to happen with the tunnels. But sure, give them the tunnels, man. Toronto's such a mess. There was once upon a time in my life where I thought I had to live in Toronto. When I lived in Toronto, I was like, this is the only place. This is the only place that exists. This is the best place in the world. You got everything. You got everything you need within walking distance, within driving distance. It's phenomenal. I love Toronto. And then I made the unfortunate, or I guess fortunate, depending what timeline we're talking about here, mistake or luxury of flying out west. I flew out west for the first time, like 2015 or 2016. I came to BC, and I was like, wow, you can actually sit in silence and not hear streetcars and sirens and horns, and there's an ocean? Huh. And you can go to the beach and it's not populated with a bunch of degenerate people like Lake Ontario is? Huh. This is kind of neat. And then I went back to Toronto and I was like, yeah, I'm not staying here. And I moved out west and happily ever after, right? There you go. All right, now we're going to shift things into some breaking news. So, Canada Post is on strike. Canada Post is on strike. And hey, look at this. Hold on a second. A lot of people that have purchased stickers recently go, where's the stickers? Where's the stickers? Folks, they're all right here. I got all of the latest orders ready to go. I can't ship them. They're not going to go anywhere. They're going to sit in a mailbox, for crying out loud. So I apologize. But if you'd like to purchase a sticker that sits in the mailbox or here in my hands until the strike is done, then feel free to click the link down below in the description and use code Sunshine for 15% off a sticker pack. But Canada Post is not the only strike that we have to worry about. Purelator and UPS is now freezing all new courier shipments to Canada because of the Canada Post strike. Are they joining the strike? Is it because they're overwhelmed with the influx of shipments? Let's watch this video. But it's getting crazy out there, folks.
Chantal Laverne likes to stay in the lines when it comes to her coloring designs, but the latest development in Canada Post's strike has made things messy.
It feels like we get ambushed. Like small businesses, it's like we always have to be like problem solving.
The Ontario business owner was heavily relying on UPS for the first 3 weeks of the strike, but now she's been notified it won't take her shipments either.
I'm building a business, so I can't start pulling back products. So yeah, it's been pretty hard.
UPS and Purelator are so swamped with deliveries, they've halted some shipments this week to try and catch up. FedEx is delaying unscheduled pickups until next week. They're blaming recent bad weather and the ongoing strike for the backlog. The companies say they now have to prioritize critical shipments. To do that, they're not accepting parcels from third-party platforms, basically middlemen couriers. And that's affecting online businesses across Canada. So say you bought a holiday gift from a small online business. Normally, it might need a smaller courier to get it to UPS, for example, which would deliver it to your home. But now, UPS is not accepting that initial delivery, meaning your parcel isn't going anywhere.
Unfortunately, the strikers are probably going to pay the price because I'm not going to go back.
It sucks for me because what am I supposed to do? Because a lot of my shipments are just held up. With Canada Post, I can't get them back. Now we have to refund customers.
When suddenly that volume is increasing more than they were comfortable with absorbing, then they're just going to press pause.
These other carriers can't handle what we handled.
The union says this is only proof postal workers perform a vital service.
We have an ability to get to places that other carriers don't, and we have infrastructure that gets it there.
Canada Post, which owns Purelator, responded Friday to the union's latest proposal.
The two parties are not negotiating at the table, rather through a federal mediator. And the union tells us it and Canada Post are still pretty far apart.
So Sam, if someone's trying to order something in time for the holidays, what does all of this mean?
Well, those small businesses, they're trying to hit those holiday deadlines for Canadians who are ordering things online. So for some, that means working with other companies to hook them up with smaller couriers to fill that gap, which in some places it's cheaper. But in other places, that means canceled deliveries because those smaller couriers won't deliver to everywhere, including rural or remote locations. And now keep in mind, even if Canada Post and the union come to an agreement soon, that backlog could last for weeks.
Sam Sampson in Edmonton tonight.
Yeah, I think all of this is going to have massive backlash on all of the courier outlets, right? And I don't think anyone has ever said we don't need postal workers. They're saying it's a vital service. No one's ever debated that. What the hell's going on? It's the most wonderful time of the year. And please, for crying out loud, deliver the fucking packages. Like, what is going on here, folks? Come on. Well, that's what's going on outside of Canada Post. Now let's take a look at what's actually happening in Canada Post, because there is an update. Here we go.
Still no end in sight, at the strike at Canada Post, as the job action is into its fourth week. 55,000 postal workers walked off the job last month, bringing mail service to a halt across the country. Wages, weekend delivery, and job security are some of the key issues in the dispute. Federal mediation was put on hold last week due to the union and the Crown Corporation being too far apart and has yet to fully resume. Canada Post, meanwhile, has released a statement which reads in part, Canada Post is surprised by public comments made by CUPW regarding our counter-proposal, as we have made significant moves to close the gap on key issues like weekend delivery, pensions, and wages, and bring much-needed urgency to the discussions. It goes on to say Canada Post has continued to put forward fair offers that are focused on our customers and our employees, improving service to grow our parcel business while protecting and enhancing what our employees have today. So for the very latest in reaction on this labor dispute, we're joined now by Mark Lubinsky, president of the Toronto local of CUPW. Good to have you today, sir. Thanks for taking the time.
Good afternoon, Lindsay.
So a lot to kind of unpack there from that latest statement from Canada Post, but what do you make of the part near the beginning where it said it's surprised that the union is making public comments?
Well, they didn't. The statement that you had there was regarding the public comments regarding the negativity of the counter offer that was given. Right now, the mediator has stepped aside, but he's still passing on offers from both parties. The last comment I heard was that they were actually going backwards. That Canada Post is going backwards, and it's a worse offer than before, and they're creating more part-time jobs in that offer. I'm not surprised. I've seen how Canada Post has acted. Their spokesperson has put the blame on the workers. He's talked about losses, but all these losses are a responsibility of the board of directors of Canada Post, of the minister, Duclos. They're responsible for these losses for 5 years. They made strategic investments. They built plants. They invested $500 million in a new plant. Now, all we need to do is go back to work. We need to have a fair offer to protect ourselves from cost of living, to have the same standards we had 3 years ago, be able to afford the groceries in the store, be able to afford living in Toronto. So that's all we're asking as members, and we're very shocked. But this behavior of Canada Post is no different. We've been negotiating for over a year. We've been on the picket line for 3 weeks. You know, if this was resolved before a strike, there would have been no issue, and we were forced to go on strike. They changed our working conditions. They took away our benefits. Now they're actually laying off workers on strike. We're perplexed. It's just intimidation for the workers.
Yeah. That part right there has gotta be illegal. There's no way you can fire employees that are unionized on a strike. That's crazy. I don't agree with the strike happening right now during Christmas, but firing Canada Post employees that are on strike, what? Come on, man. That's gotta be crazy. Unless I'm overlooking something, but I feel like that's gotta be illegal.
That are on the picket line. So I'm very disturbed, but I know this employer. I've dealt with them for 34 years. That's just how they are. The government, Minister Duclos, needs to be responsible. We need good jobs, like he said, for Canadians, but he needs to get that to his CEO to understand that. And tell Doug Edinger and that board, respect Canadians, respect the workers. You know, that's the realities.
And I do want to get a little bit more into, those demands you just mentioned and possibly some of the sticking points in negotiations. But just touching on this statement once more, because there was one more question I had from this. The Canada Post said that we have not yet received a formal response from CUPW through the mediators, I'm assuming, to the latest offer. Has the union now formally responded?
I'm not privy to that information. I was updated yesterday. You gave me a further update from Canada Post today. But, they're going back and forth. So has the union given a counter proposal to their last offer? I guess they didn't if Canada Post says they haven't. But the mediator hasn't started up mediation, but he is passing forward these counter offers from both parties. I know our union has modified our demands, and we also have moved on Canada Post demands to move forward. We want a negotiated contract at the bargaining table. We want to be back to work yesterday. But, we need a fair agreement. What Canada Post proposed initially in their global offer, they wanted us to take a cut of salary of 10% because there's a cost of living. We're all falling behind as workers. In Toronto, rent has gone up in the last 9 years. It's doubled. how can we afford to live? We need to be treated with respect. Workers in Canada Post, a crown corporation that's owned by the government, that uses no taxpayer money, that has used reserves to modernize our company. It's a public institution, so it's ours. So we just want respect and be able to live with dignity. And Canada Post, their executive board needs to understand we're workers, and the government needs to tell them what they tell us in public. They need to tell that board, treat us with respect. We're just workers, and we want a decent cost of living increase so we could survive, be the same place where we were 3 years ago.
Okay, we are just about out of time. I do want to ask you one more question, though. I appreciate, you already went through kind of the demands, the sticking points. I take your point that a lot of things have been taken away from Canada Post workers, like benefits, for example. But for customers who are kind of like...
I didn't know that. I didn't know that their benefits were taken away. Like, you may agree with the strike, you may not agree with the strike, but every worker in Canada has the deserve to be treated with dignity, like a human being. And it's starting to sound like these people are tossed to the side, right? Just for a failing postal service that's constantly running a deficit. Their benefits have been taken away. They have absolutely no benefits. And their costs or their wages are not keeping up with inflation, which is something that, to be honest, most Canadians can actually agree with. But it really feels like Canada Post is just absolutely throwing the employees into the gutter.
Like, okay, this is the third week of the strike. Things have been disrupted. What's your message to customers who are watching this back and forth between the union and Canada Post? You did say you wanted to get back to work yesterday. Are you hopeful that maybe a deal can be reached soon?
So one thing I just want to correct is we're fighting for new workers. A lot of these things, they are taken away from new workers. They want to create a part-time workforce that works 8 hours a week. We don't want a gigafied economy. We don't want gigafied
there it is.
Corporate workers. So that's where the major fight is. But regarding what to say to our customers, I empathize with you. I'm a customer also. I've even, Christmas, we lost 3 weeks of our wages, 6%. And I looked online too to buy something, but I'm not going to use no other carrier. I say we are fighting for the middle class, the regular workers. If we don't win our fight, we have the power, the right to go on strike. We're forced to go on strike by a crown corporation that says that we have the right to live with dignity. That's all we want.
I agree with that. I agree that Canada Post workers, all workers in Canada, have the right to live with dignity. And what's happening right now is not that. You have a corporation that is abusing its employees, using and abusing them, and then throwing them to the side. And this is something that you may be angry at, that Canada Post on strike. I'm angry, man. I've got a bunch of stickers. This is only part of the pile right here of all the people that have ordered stickers that I can't send, right? There's people probably in this live chat right now watching this video or whatever, right? And it's very annoying. But there's going to come a time where you might feel like you're underpaid or your benefits get taken away. And all of a sudden, hey, are you going to go on strike? Yeah, you should. You should. If you have the ability to, and fight for what you deserve, what you believe you deserve, what it is that you deserve, then go ahead and do that, because we all know that massive corporations, they don't treat their employees correctly. It's a facade. It's a brochure, right? It looks good on paper, but when you actually are there, it's not very good. It's not nice. And that's what seems to be happening with Canada Post. So I could be mistaken. There could be parts of this that I'm not understanding, maybe things that I've overlooked. But I think that Canada Post employees, man, are treated very poorly. That's my opinion. I'd love to know yours. Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for today's live stream? We are now getting in to the vote of non-confidence in a bit. First, we got to get through question period. But for those that are just tuning in, I talked about this at the start of the stream. Let's get some W's in the chat. Let's make sure you guys are even alive. Come on, are you there? Anyone? Hello? Anybody there? You guys awake? For those that tuned in at the start of the stream, you would have seen this. But for those that are tuning in now, when's the vote? When's the vote, Sunshine? When's the vote? What's going to happen? When's the vote? When are they voting? Calm down. Take a deep breath. It's going to happen today. Everything's going to be okay. Okay? Let's get through this together. What is going to happen? Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives are pissed. They've put forward a motion for a vote of non-confidence, and that's taking place aujourd'hui. So they're going to go through question period, and then after question period, they're going to have the vote of non-confidence. Now, who's going to vote for what? Are we going to get an early election? That's what everybody wants to know. I get it. I want that too. If I could snap my fingers and have an election, my fingers would be bleeding because I would have snapped so much. So let's all just take a breath and look at the facts. And the facts have been posted on my X account. If you aren't following me on X, I highly recommend you do so by clicking the link down in the description, or go to your X search bar and type in Mistersunshinebaby, same name as here, and you'll find me. Here's what I posted. Today is the day, folks. The final vote of non-confidence of the year. Will it be enough to topple the government? Here's the detailed breakdown. Today, the House of Commons will be voting for a conservative non-confidence motion sponsored by Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. Two such motions have been presented to the House during this fall parliamentary session. Yet both have failed because the Bloc and the Libs and the NDP and the Green unanimously voted nay. So what are we going to see today that's different? Well, I'm going to tell you. The Bloc Québécois has said that they will actually support the motion. In fact, rewind. The Bloc Québécois wanted to put forward the motion of non-confidence, but they didn't have the ability to because Pierre Poilievre kind of sort of froze Parliament. When he went to the cops, he went to the police and said, hey, police, Trudeau, that guy over there, he's doing bad things. And the police said, okay, we're on it, we're investigating. Phew, Parliament frozen. No motions, no bills, nothing can really get pushed forward. That brings us to right now. The Bloc is going, hey, Pierre Poilievre, unfreeze Parliament, tabarouette. We want to put forward the comments. And Pierre says, no, I'm going to do it. All right. Who's your dad? Who's your papa? Me. All right. Kiss the ring. Kiss the ring, Bloc. Kiss the ring. And the Bloc says, one more. So here we are right now. The Bloc didn't get to put forward the vote of non-confidence, but they have an opportunity to vote in the favor of it. And that's what we're going to see today. We better freaking see that, or I'm telling you, there's going to be a lot of pissed off people. But it seems like all roads are leading to the Bloc and the Conservatives coalition, sort of, at least on this issue. So how's everyone else going to vote? Well, I'm going to tell you. Here's what I think. Here's what I think. Since the Speaker doesn't vote, Pierre needs 50% plus one out of the 337 MPs. This means he needs 169 votes if every single member of Parliament votes. Yays, we're looking at the Conservatives are going to get 119. The Bloc should get 33. There should be 2 independent. And we could be potentially looking at 15 rebel liberals. That would be ideal. Nays, you're going to see 138 liberals. You're going to see 25 NDPs. You're going to see 2 Greens and 2 independents. So we potentially have enough to actually pull this off. Now everyone's watching. Look how many people right now are in the live stream. 6,000 people. Question period hasn't even begun. Everybody's waiting for the same thing. For the vote to happen. The vote will happen after question period. So we're going to watch question period. We're going to get through this. We're going to feel it out. We're going to see who's voting for who's doing what today. Who's shave showered? Who's having a good day? Who's having a bad day? So here we go. Let's take a look at right now what's going on the House floor. Conservatives already wet their whistles. They already wet their beaks this morning. They were on the House floor. You go back to the start of the live stream. They were on the House floor and they were spicy. Pierre's warmed up. He's already done his stretches. He's already done his Gauche Fraba meditation All right? Whippersnapper, whippersnapper, whippersnapper. He's all warmed up. His vocal cords are ready to go. Liberals, the NDP, they don't do none of that stuff. They don't do none of that stuff. Word has it, Jagmeet, his Maserati gave him the wrong directions. So he's actually going around Parliament right now. He can't even navigate downtown Ottawa because he doesn't know where he's going. The Maserati's going, take a left, take a left, take a left. And Jagmeet's going, that's a one way. I can't go that way. So here we go. Let's take a look at what's actually happening on the House floor, shall we?
Integrity and accountability.
Sheila Fraser, fellow CPA.
Bravo. The Honourable Member for Dufferin-Caledon.
I'm going to talk about my friend, the Honourable John McDermott. He was the Member of Parliament for Brampton, Georgetown from 1979 until 1993, and a Cabinet Minister in the Mulroney government from 1988 until 1993 when he retired. John generously gave his time in the community. He was an honorary colonel in the Lawrence Scots. He was the chair of our local hospital board. I met John in 1988 when I volunteered on his campaign when I was 17 years old. John returned that favour in spades in 2019 when he helped me get re-elected. Over the next 5 years, John became a mentor and a friend, and he shared so many amazing anecdotes with his time in Brian Mulroney's government. On Thursday night, I had the opportunity to give John a King's Coronation Medal in his hospital room, surrounded by many of his closest friends. On Friday, John passed away with his family surrounded by him. John was a true gentleman. He was a patriot. He served his country with honor and distinction. Godspeed, John, and God bless him and his family.
Good job.
The Honourable Member for Newmarket Aurora.
Mr. Speaker, on November the 12th, the 28th Annual Holiday Heroes Toy and Food Drive by York Regional Police officially kicked off. Over the years, it's helped over 100,000 Canadians in need by collecting donations of cash, gift cards, toys, non-perishable food items, and children's clothing. Thank you to the Newmarket Soccer Club for hosting, and thank you to the York Regional Police, and thank you to the partners, the Salvation Army and Victim Services of York Region, who play a key role in distributing these items throughout the community. Thank you also to our community. We live in a place I am proud to call home, proud of how we support each other, and
if you haven't yet already, I'd like to encourage you guys to hit the like button on the stream and subscribe to the channel. It's going to help get more people in here. It's going to help with the growth of the channel. It's tax deductible for all I care.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'd appreciate it.
The Honourable Member for Humber River Black Creek.
Mr. Speaker, the persecution of Ahmadi Muslims is a harsh reality in many parts of the world, where they face violence, discrimination, and the denial of their basic rights simply for practicing their faith. This injustice highlights the importance of religious freedom. Here in Canada, we are fortunate to live in a society that values and upholds this freedom. Every individual has the right to worship without fear of persecution. I am proud that many in the Ahmadiyya community, under the leadership of National President Lal Khan Malik, have chosen Humber River Black Creek to call their home. Our community is undoubtedly better for having the Ahmadiyya community amongst us, as they inspire us to their values of peace, tolerance, and community service. As Canadians, we must appreciate and protect religious freedom for all, ensuring a world where respect, understanding, and inclusion flourish. Love for all, hatred for none.
Shut the fuck up.
The Honourable Member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Mr. Speaker, will the NDP leader stand by his words, or is he just a walking, talking pile of contradictions? Remember when the NDP leader said that he was going to rip up his supply and confidence deal? Oh, right, that was just a stunt for the Elmwood-Transcona by-election.
Yeah.
As it turns out, the Prime Minister names the tune, and the NDP leader is happy to sing along. The NDP leader was happy to sing along to the tune of doubling housing costs. The NDP leader was happy to sing along to letting dangerous criminals out on bail. The NDP leader was happy to sing along to the tune of driving food bank use to an all-time high, leading to 2 million visits in just 1 month. And the NDP leader is going to sing along to the tune of quadrupling the carbon tax, driving up the cost of gas, groceries, and home heating. Will the NDP leader start singing his own tune and finally vote non-confidence so Conservatives can axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget and stop the crime? Or will the NDP leader sing along with the Liberals so that the Prime Minister gets the power, he gets his pensions, and Canadians get the bill?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Ottawa-Vanier. Mr. Speaker, it's with great sadness that I rise today to honour Denis Gratton, the well-known Franco-Ontarian journalist and commentator who passed away on December 7th. Originally from Vanier, Mr. Gratton was an essential voice for the community of Ottawa-Vanier and for
saying
all
I love your content, dude. As an American, I don't often keep up with Canadian politics for obvious reasons.
He put words to our lives
but watching
and
your
gave a
vids have been
voice
so fun this year.
without a voice.
Thank you,
He
Mr.
stood out
Sunshine.
through his courage,
Thanks, Pete. I appreciate
particularly when he accompanied Canadian peacekeepers to Bosnia in 1993 in the middle of the war. He played a key role in a number of historic moments, particularly in supporting the
51st
fight
state.
for the survival of the Montfort Hospital. His commitment to Francophones, his humanity, and his ability to make us think, laugh, and cry will not be forgotten. Denis was much more than a journalist. He was an ambassador for our culture and for our rights. My thoughts go to his family. Thank you, Denis.
The Honourable Member for Peterborough-Kawartha.
The leader of the NDP gets his $2.2 million pension, while Canadians get the misery and the bill. The leader of the NDP continues to keep a Prime Minister in power who has doubled the cost of housing, doubled rent, created record high usage of food banks, and record high increases in child poverty.
That's right.
Why haven't we had an election? Because the leader of the NDP continues to keep that Prime Minister in power. He told Canadians he was ripping up the supply and confidence agreement, yet here we are again. You know, don't take my word for it. I'll quote the leader of the NDP. Here are his exact words. The fact is the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. There is only one person responsible for keeping that Prime Minister in power despite the genuine suffering and misery Canadians are having, and that is the leader of the NDP.
Order. The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, fall economic statements were created by the Liberal Party and by the Finance Minister Paul Martin with the goal of fighting the deficit. But the legacy of Mr. Martin is being tarnished by the new practices of this incompetent Liberal government. The target of a $40 billion deficit seems to have been missed, and not by just a few bucks. The PBO now expects that the federal deficit for 24-25 will be $46.4 billion. Which blows past the already astronomical targets. Canadians want this government to be held accountable so that they can see how big the deficit is. And don't forget that deficit will be paid by future generations. A Conservative government will fix the budget by putting in place a dollar for a dollar law, which will require that any new spending be compensated with an equal amount of savings. That's how Canadian families manage their finances and get to the end of the month, and that's how a Conservative government will fix the budget.
The Honourable Member for London North Centre.
A tax cut for Canadian, Mr. Speaker. That's exactly what this government is going forward with, beginning on December 14th and carrying through to February. We've heard from Canadians. We know the challenges that they've been through previous years. And in the pandemic and into the modern day, we stand with them. I stand with my constituents during this time. I know what this will mean for them. Lifting GST, HST off of the cost of groceries, off of the cost of a night out for a meal for a family of four. Imagine what that will do at a family restaurant. Imagine what that will do, Mr. Speaker, for the entrepreneurs in those restaurants, Mr. Speaker. It's no surprise that restaurant owners across the country, including restaurant associations, are completely behind this measure. Think about a young family also, Mr. Speaker, a young family looking forward to bringing home a new little boy or girl into the household. Those car seats are expensive, Mr. Speaker. I have personal experience in that. Lifting tax on that, Mr. Speaker, is going to go a long way. That's why we did it. We're going to continue to stand there for the people of this country. Right on.
The honourable member for...
Oh, here we go soon.
Mr. Speaker, I stand with all workers across Canada and in my riding.
Smash that like button, folks.
Imagine being paid so little you can't afford the...
We had 2,000 likes and 6,500 people watching.
Hundreds of thousands.
Let's see if we get to 3,000 likes. Huh?
Why is it that management feels comfortable padding their pockets and then point the blame at those who strike? People brave enough to put themselves in a place where they are not getting paid and now have lost their benefits. Shame. I have stood on the picket line with some of these folks, and when I get home, I will join them again if they are still not able to do the jobs they desperately want to do. The Conservatives will never stand on the picket line fighting alongside those brave union members who have made this country better for every single Canadian with their actions. The Liberals need to stop interrupting the process and allow for fair negotiations. Thank you to the postal workers who are still collecting letters for Santa and delivering, in some cases without pay, checks to the most vulnerable. Solidarity.
Order. The honourable member for La Salle-et-Marne Verdun. Today, I am celebrating the 75th anniversary of the Club Richelieu of Verdun. Volunteers in this association in my riding work very hard to promote the French language and to improve the lives of people in our riding with a host of charitable activities. Their motto is peace and fraternity. The members of this association don't hold back. They hold fundraising activities that benefit young people and the underprivileged in our riding. These activities include the poker tournament, the silent auction, and the dinners that have been held many times over the years. Since 1949, the list of charities funded by the club is very long. These include the Harmonie de Verdun, the Ancre des Gens, the Camp Richelieu Saint-Côme, the Petit Renard, the Toujours Ensemble, and I also have to note the club's support for St. Vincent de Paul. And maybe you're not familiar with them, Mr. Speaker, but for the people of Verdun, they're very, very important. In the Southwest, we're a tightly woven community, and it's something to see. Long live Club Richelieu de Verdun.
The honourable member for Charleswood St. James, Assiniboia Headingley.
Common sense Conservatives have one simple request for this Prime Minister. Please just stop. Stop the tax hikes, especially the job-killing carbon tax. Stop fueling inflation by cutting inflationary spending and axing the sales tax on homes so home buyers can save up to $50,000. Stop adding debt by confirming that the deficit has not risen above the $40 billion guardrail promised by the Prime Minister. Never before has so much been spent to achieve so little. This Prime Minister has spent so much, he's added more debt than every other Prime Minister in Canadian history combined. Even former Finance Minister Bill Morneau agrees that inflationary spending has driven up the cost of everything. Mr. Speaker, there's an old adage, once you've dug yourself into a hole, it's time to stop digging. It's time for a carbon tax election so common sense Conservatives can axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop
the crime. There we go. There we go. There we go. We got some momentum. There's Scheer. There's the class clown. Love him.
The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We all know when the Conservatives hit the campaign trail, they talk a line of tax savings, Mr. Speaker. But when it comes right down to it, what do their actions on the floor of the House? Mr. Speaker, when it came a time to give a tax break to Canada's middle class, they voted no. Let me pose a question to you. How would you define hypocrisy, Mr. Speaker? When the Conservatives actually campaigned on giving a GST holiday in the last election, all of them, Mr. Speaker, including the leader of the Conservative Party, we bring forward a tax holiday on the GST, Mr. Speaker, and what do the Conservative Party do?
What?
They vote against a tax relief for the holiday season. Talk about the leader being a Grinch, Mr. Speaker. At the end of the day, you cannot trust the Conservatives. If you want a tax break, you vote for the Liberal Party, Mr. Speaker.
Oral questions. Guess who's on? All brothers, opposition, Supreme Next Prime Minister Canada, Poilievre.
Just before Christmas, snow is a falling.
finally, the minister will table her economic statement after this Prime Minister has doubled our national debt, adding more to our debt than all former Prime Ministers combined. He's doubled the cost of housing with bureaucracy that has been hampering building. He's doubled the number of people who have to go to a food bank with taxes on food. We're asking for one thing. Stop tax increases. Stop inflationary spending. Stop adding debt to Canadians. The Honourable Member, the Honourable Minister for Justice. Mr. Speaker, we are very proud of our economic record, and we'll present it on the 16th of December, so next week.
Do you want to know where Justin Trudeau is?
We will talk about our record on the economy.
He's in Halifax.
Inflation is within targets put forward by the Bank of Canada. The Bank of Canada's key interest rate has gone down 4 times consecutively, and that is our economic record, and we're very proud of it. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. He's so proud of this statement that he wants to bury it in snow, Mr. Speaker. We want them to stop. Stop taxing people. We want them to eliminate GST on new home build, which would be one way of stopping inflationary taxes that have led to a costly life in Canada. We want promises to be kept. The Minister said that deficits would not go beyond $40 billion. Will she respect that promise, yes or no? The Honourable Minister for Human Resources and Energy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know that housing costs too much, and that is the reason for which we have eliminated sales tax for apartments. Canada is building at record rates. We have built more housing than when the Leader of the Opposition was the Minister for Housing, and we are seeing results. The cost of rent has gone down this year in big metropolitan areas like Montreal. The Conservative leader wants to bring back taxes on building. His plan will increase the cost of housing.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, after doubling the debt with inflationary spending, doubling the cost of housing with more bureaucracy that blocks building, doubling the number of people using food banks with carbon taxes on farmers and truckers who bring us our food. Finally, they're planning a fall update, but they'll do it in the snow on December 16th. Our message is stop. Yes. Stop the inflationary spending. Stop the tax increases on food and homes. Stop indebting Canadians. Will they please just stop?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, on the 16th of December, we will present our economic record in this chamber, and we will talk about the fall economic statement. And I anticipate that you're going to hear a lot about the economic record that we've amassed. One thing that I anticipate you'll hear about is what we've done with respect to childcare. On childcare, an economic affordability model, we've brought it down to $10 a day in 8 provinces. That has resulted in 110,000 women joining the workplace. What is that record, Mr. Speaker? 85% of women are now participating in the workforce in Canada. That is a record high. That is what we stand behind on this side of the House.
Not on merit, but because of gender?
Mr. Speaker, what they've amassed is a lot of debt. In fact, they doubled the debt. This Prime Minister has added more debt than all prior Prime Ministers combined, which has caused the worst inflation in 40 years, inflation that is now rising as the debt is rising. Now, the Finance Minister said that she had a guardrail for the deficit. It would not go beyond $40 billion. If you go up to $40 billion, that means you've hit the guardrail. And if you go higher than $40 billion, you've gone through the guardrail. What's on the other side of a guardrail? A cliff. Yeah. Is this minister leading us off the cliff?
I mean, I'd say so.
Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Let's talk about about the spending that our government is doing. Let's talk about what observers are observing. Tiff Macklem, I'm pretty sure he knows who that is. The governor of the Bank of Canada says we're no longer trying to get inflation down. Government spending is not pushing against getting inflation down. We have already brought it down. Let's talk about David Dodge, the former Bank of Canada governor who was in place when that member was in cabinet. He said because it was obsessively focused on reducing the federal deficit over fiscal years 2011 to 2016, the Harper government unnecessarily contributed to a slower rather than a more muted recovery. We're not going to follow that playbook because it didn't work.
And ask colleagues to please not take the floor so that we can hear the answer to the question clearly. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, in the spirit of nonpartisanship, we have put forward a motion inspired by the leader of the NDP.
Yeah, use his own words.
He said that this Prime Minister is weak, is greedy, is selfish, and is beholden to corporate interests. He has pointed out that this Prime Minister has violated the rights of workers. So we took the NDP leader's words, we put it in a motion that includes non-confidence. Will the Prime Minister allow this NDP leader a free vote so that he can vote non-confidence?
Look at the enthusiasm. One party's alive, the other party's dead. The Bloc is standing up. The Conservatives are saying, come on.
See, that is stretching the limits, of course, of question dealing with
Shut up.
See that the Honourable Government House Leader is on her feet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One thing we know, Mr. Speaker, is that the Leader of the Opposition certainly doesn't allow any free votes for his members of Parliament. And what we also know is that he doesn't allow them to speak for themselves. What we do know is that when they put forward, try to advocate for their communities, what does he say? No, don't do that, because I don't think it's politically expedient for me. So what he does do is muzzle his own MPs, doesn't allow them to have free vote, and keeps them from standing up for their communities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Saint-Maxime School is in the news for prayers in class, homophobic comments, and students rejecting sex education in classes, among other things. The Quebec government has had enough of attacks upon secularism. It is asking Ottawa to put an end to religious exemptions in the criminal code and wants to tighten up Bill 21 on secularism. Ottawa's doing the opposite. It's challenging Bill 21. It's just beat around the bush about religious exemptions. When will this government stop undermining secularism in Quebec? The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague no doubt knows that education is a provincial matter. If he wants to talk about education and the way to protect children in the school system in Quebec, then he has to turn to Quebec City. This forum isn't quite where education is discussed. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Quebec is a welcoming society that extends its arms to those who choose to integrate. And to integrate successfully, we all want to share the values that unite us and bring us closer together. Equality between men and women, separation of religion and state, French as a common language, the right to love whoever we want. Canadian multiculturalism says the opposite. There's no need to integrate, no need to adhere to any values. Don't change a thing about yourselves. Does the federal government realise that its multiculturalism is harming the integration of new Quebecers and harming Quebec's ability to live together? The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unity is exactly what the Canadian Federation is encouraging, and that's why in Canada and in Quebec we are proud of being a united party that defends the rights and freedoms of everyone so that they can do what they believe is right for them. Once again, Mr. Speaker, education is a provincial matter, so we ask our colleague to turn to Quebec City instead of here about education.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Imagine this. A woman in her 70s,
He took his
she's
Rolex
worked her
off.
whole life, raised her kids, done everything right. Now she's retired and her pension doesn't go far enough and she's got to skip meals. The Prime Minister believes that someone earning $140,000 a year deserves a check of $250 but that she doesn't. Why?
Here, here, here.
He took his Rolex off to try to relate to people.
Mr. Speaker, we're going to stand by our record of defending seniors. On multiple occasions in this chamber over the last 9 years, we've done things like change the retirement age from 67, as proposed by the Harper Conservatives, back down to 65. We've made targeted investments to improve old age security for those over the age of 75. Most recently, we put in place a dental care plan for seniors that has had, despite assertions by the Conservatives that it doesn't even exist, 2 million people sign up and over 1 million people actually receive services for the first time in decades. That's a record of serving seniors and assisting seniors and meeting them where they are. We'll stand by that record.
The honourable member for Burnaby South.
Mentioned that the minister didn't answer the question why they don't deserve checks of $250.
Imagine someone else living with disabilities, someone who can't make ends meet.
And this guy supports this.
Believes that this person doesn't need a helping hand. Will the Prime Minister finally see sense and include people with disabilities in their $250 check? The Honourable Minister for Justice. The measures that we have made on this side of the House targets poverty and targets helps people living with disabilities. We've added a benefit for them and them alone. What we want to do over the last few weeks is to make changes to GST that will help all Canadians. We'll always fight against poverty, and numbers show that we have managed to do so with a reduction in the poverty rates in Canada. Thank you.
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Today, the NDP leader has a chance to prove that he didn't sell out Canadian workers for his own pension. Now, he famously promised Canadians that he ripped up his coalition with the Liberals, saying they, quote, were too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. Now, Conservatives agree, and Canadians want a carbon tax election. So, will the Prime Minister allow the NDP leader to vote for his own words, or did the PM whip the NDP vote to block a carbon tax election?
Everyone's standing up, and so is Pierre. Pierre's looking over at the block on stand up.
I'm afraid that question doesn't, again, meet the relevance of the administration of government. I do see the government House leader rising to answer. Colleagues, a couple of things. One, let's make sure that when someone has the floor, that no one else is taking the floor. And B, colleagues, I would hate for us to repeat what had gone on Friday. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you mentioned, there was actually no question for the government there, but if the member opposite wants to talk about pensions, he could talk about the pension of the leader of the opposition, who, because he's been here for 2 decades, is estimated at being about $2 million, Mr. Speaker. And if he wants to talk about muzzling of members of parliament, he should probably pose the question to the leader of his own party, who doesn't like MPs that don't ask the questions that he wants them to ask. In fact, we see all of them around the outskirts of the Conservative area in this House of Commons.
If Pierre fixes Canada, give him a bigger pension. Give him a $5 million pension.
Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Well, it looks like this Prime Minister has lost control of everything except his control over the NDP. Now, according to the NDP leader's own words, quote, "You're never going to count on us if you're going to take away the rights of the workers. Never." Now, we've seen that this Prime Minister has done just that, ordering binding arbitration. But the question is, what has this Prime Minister promised to the NDP in exchange for their support for his failing government and his failed carbon tax?
Yeah. And we have an opportunity to change that today.
Again,
you got mail.
That is not relevant to the administration of government or about and the chair will have something to say about this at the end of question period. But I do see that the honourable minister was rising on his feet. I don't know if he wants to continue to respond. I see no minister rising. The honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, every time that there's a ruling about the government on this issue, there's an absolutely material question, which is the Liberal or the NDP say one thing over and over again, and then come in and support the Liberals. So asking what the Liberals have promised the NDP in favor of their support after time and time again saying all of these things, they keep supporting the government. So what has the government promised the NDP to avoid a carbon tax election?
Yeah. So Fergus is going to try and delay the vote in non-confidence to say that the Conservative question was unfair, and now he muted the mic. Wow, there's more eyeballs watching today than any other day, and this was the same thing with the previous two votes in non-confidence. And this guy has the audacity to go
the end of question
and be a dictator.
Perhaps I wish I could have done it earlier, but I see that the honourable minister is rising on her feet to answer. The honourable leader of the government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, in response to that member's question that, as I think we all know, doesn't actually have to do with government business, but the member opposite, and in fact most of the Conservative caucus, know a thing or two about saying one thing and doing the opposite. They've been talking about cutting taxes, but at the first opportunity to cut taxes for Canadians, they say no, Mr. Speaker. They talk about, standing up on behalf of their constituents, but when they try to do that, the leader of the opposition takes away their ability to pose questions in this place. Mr. Speaker, if they don't repeat the slogans ad nauseum of the leader of the opposition, they're simply not allowed to speak. They're pretty good at saying one thing and doing another. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Wow, this is messed up.
To be very clear, Speaker, the leader of the NDP has gotten up and railed against the Liberals for the GST measures, against workers, every possible thing. The NDP has said the government is incompetent. They said they can't vote for him. Yet every time there's a confidence motion, the NDP stand up and do what? They vote for the government. So it is the business of this place. How much is it costing Canadians? What has this administration promised the NDP to get them to vote against their leader's own words?
Yeah. There is something seriously wrong with the House Speaker. He is abusing his power today of all days.
Once again, the honourable government House leader is rising to her feet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the honourable member knows something about railing against a leader, but one question that she might want to ask the leader of her party is why he won't get a security clearance. I believe last week at...
What did she just say? Railing against a leader?
Leadership contestant about alleged interference by India in the Conservative leadership race, but the leader of the opposition refuses to get a security clearance to actually learn about what happened. Mr. Speaker, he should put the security interests of Canadians ahead of his own personal interests. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, on the 4th of September, all Canadians witnessed the leader of the NDP ripping up the agreement with this Liberal government. He was really convincing at the time. He said the Liberals are too weak, too selfish and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for the people. That was on the 4th of September. But today, the 9th of December, will the leader of the NDP allow his members to vote for themselves against him? And if they vote following the party line, how much will this cost to Canadians? Once again, I would like to encourage all members to refrain from speaking when they're not recognised in the House of Commons. Once again, we are in a situation where the speakership is not in the most enviable position, because the question doesn't have to do with government, the government and its operations, but the honourable minister is rising. Well, the question is not relevant, Mr. Speaker, but one relevant question is why this honourable member can't speak for himself and speak for his constituents. His Conservative leader claims that affordable housing that are built in his riding and in other Conservative ridings simply don't exist. That's a bit odd. He says that housing projects don't exist. where there are hundreds of affordable housing units that are currently being built and that are built in Conservative ridings.
Hundreds, eh?
Once again, before the honourable member stands to take the floor, I would like everyone
Pierre's on his phone. I think he's watching the stream. Everybody say hi, Pierre, in the chat. Everybody say hi, Pierre.
Well, my question was very simple. How much will it cost Canadians? The minister doesn't know how to count, but the minister loves to spend. So the problem is the NDP added another layer to this. The leader of the NDP said that the Liberal government will always give in to corporate greed and will always intervene to ensure that unions have no power. That's our motion word for what, Mr. Speaker? So what does the Prime Minister think of a leader who might vote against him? This Prime Minister, who has never respected his word for deficits when he announced to Canadians that there would be a budgetary balance. The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement. I know how to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Mr. Speaker. That's the number of affordable housing units that were built under the Conservative leader when he was Minister for Housing. 8,000 are being built right now just in Quebec, thanks to the $2 billion agreement between the federal government and the government of Quebec. And hundreds of these housing units will be in Conservative ridings. There are 50,000 that we have built throughout the country over the last few years. The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Mr. Speaker,
is he wearing a...
For the
what the hell is that pin? Is it an Italian pin, a Palestinian pin?
CBSA Assessment and Revenue Management Application, or CARM. 22 breakdowns in 1 month for an application that took 14 years to develop, and that cost taxpayers $556 million. $500 million with just a 50% cost overrun, not to mention the fact that the agency hid important documents from parliamentarians. Today, the Committee for Trade voted unanimously to ask the Auditor General to investigate this latest Liberal fiasco. Will the government support our request for an inquiry? The Honourable Minister for Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, my colleague knows full well that the government does not give instructions to the Auditor General, and we respect the free will of committees to study what they want and to invite people, such as the Auditor General, to study important files for Canadians. We believe that the CARM system replaced one that was old. It was 36 years old. And we understand the private sector's concerns, and I have full trust that we will rectify this very rapidly. The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. There's a real cost to the agency's fiasco with the CARM. There's one for taxpayers, $556 million, but there's also one for entrepreneurs. Their imports are paralysed at the border. They're suffering billing errors, they're being double paid for direct debits, and there are in-terminal delays for them. They have absolutely no customer service when the CARM crashes. And it takes weeks for the agency to correct its mistakes. What is the government doing today to stop making businesses pay for its fiasco? The Honourable Minister for Public Safety. Once again, Mr. Speaker, we, of course, share the concerns of our colleague. We will support Canadian businesses to make sure that they pay the right amount in an efficient way. That was the objective of modernising this technology. That started in 2010. So it's not just one government, it's two governments that decided to improve a system to make it easier to access, but also make customs easier to navigate. We will correct the errors. The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. The CARM application fiasco is not a first for the CBSA. The agency was also behind ArriveCan. Let's not forget the application that was supposed to cost $80,000, but that ended up costing $60 million. Clearly, there's a fundamental problem at the agency when it comes to transparency, monitoring of spending, and cost overruns. The Bloc Québécois and the Trade Committee have asked the Auditor General to investigate. The government cannot afford to wait for another fiasco before taking action. Will it put the agency under direct supervision? The Honourable Minister for Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, We have discussed here in the House a number of times about how important the work of the CBSA is, be it protecting our country, be it dealing with immigration cases, be it stopping the entrance of drugs like fentanyl. So the CBSA every single day does excellent work for our country. We fully trust their work. We will invest even more to support their important work, and that is exactly what we will do.
The honourable member for Barrie-Innisfil.
The NDP leader continues to hold the country hostage, playing political hokey-pokey to secure his pension by February. First, he put himself in a coalition agreement with the Liberals. Then he took himself out, ripping up the agreement while shaking his fist all about. Now he's put himself back in, taping the agreement together, turning himself around after saying he would vote no confidence. So what deal did the Prime Minister make with the leader of the NDP to secure his vote of confidence, and how much will it cost Canadians?
That's a good question.
Find out December 16th. Confidence is directly related to administration. What's it going to cost us?
Oh, he muted the mic again. What is going on? Hey, can we send another email to Fergus about this? This is not acceptable. This is messed up, man. We're going to send some more emails.
In the opinion of the chair, this actually question is pertinent to the administration of government. The honourable leader of the government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the Conservative members of Parliament, all they can do is say one thing and do another. They're pretending to support workers' rights when in reality it's the leader of the opposition who brought forward some of the most draconian anti-worker legislation in this country's history. Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue to stand up for workers right across this country. It's a record we are proud of. It's not something the Conservatives can say that they have ever done. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Barrie-Innisfil.
Words matter. The leader of the NDP said he ripped up his supply and confidence agreement with the Liberals, saying the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. Speaking to poor workers before the Liberals violated their right to strike, he said, if there's any vote in Parliament that in any way impacts your rights, I can tell you right now, we'll vote no, whether that vote is a confidence vote or not. So what did the Prime Minister, what deal did he make with the leader of the NDP to secure his vote of confidence, and how much will it cost Canadians?
The Honourable Minister for Labour and for Seniors.
Mr. Speaker, Bill C-377 and Bill C-525 will go down in history as some of the most oppressively anti-Labour legislation ever passed in this Parliament. One of the very first acts of this government was to repeal both of those pieces of legislation. The author of those pieces of legislation was none other than the leader of the opposition, its chief architect, its chief salesman. He's the most anti-worker leader ever elected to this House of Commons.
That's defamation. Cut his fingers off.
Alors, s'il vous plaît.
Order, please. The honourable member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, the leader of the NDP said that he ripped up the agreement with the Liberals last fall. The leader of the NDP said that the Liberals are too weak, too selfish and too beholden to corporate interests. The NDP leader also said that the Liberal government will always give in to corporate greed at the expense of workers. So, Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister allow the leader of the NDP to vote for the latter's own words, or will the Liberal government push the NDP caucus to vote against the leader of the NDP leader? This time I'm not particularly convinced that this is a pertinent question to government operations, but the Honourable Minister for Labour and Seniors...
Oh, he'll let the question stand. Wow.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, my lord.
Previous Parliament, Bills C-377 and C-529 were some of the most anti-union bills in Western history. the main spokesperson and the main architect of these bills was none other than the current leader of the opposition. So, he is the most anti-union leader in the history of Canada. I ask him to ask the honourable member to ask his leader about his leader's opinion.
For Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speaker, Women's Shelters Canada says that the housing shortage is trapping people in abusive circumstances, especially in cities where the rent is skyrocketing. In Saskatchewan, victims are fleeing to rural areas with cheaper rents, but with fewer social supports and public resources. And shelters in the Greater Toronto area are overwhelmed because rents are out of reach. Liberals have let people down. Survivors need affordable housing to seek safety from abusers now. When will the minister deliver affordable rent geared to income housing to save lives?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
The colleague is right, Mr. Speaker. We do need more affordable housing in Canada. We do need more shelters in Canada. And that's why this federal government has put forward the National Housing Strategy that is doing just that. The member began her question by pointing to vulnerable women. I sympathize in my own community and communities across the country. It remains not just a challenge but a crisis, and that's why the housing strategy that I mentioned just now has placed a focus on ensuring women are housed who have experienced domestic violence. Why the Rapid Housing Initiative is doing the same thing. We have more to do, and we will do that work in partnership with any interested party. I know the Conservatives won't be there, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Mr. Speaker, families in Nanaimo Ladysmith are trying to get by, but with more and more people relying on things. Loaves and Fishes and its many volunteers have gone above and beyond, but they require funding to expand and meet the growing need. Despite ample attempts, the Liberals have not delivered. So, Mr. Speaker, I will ask again, will this government finally provide Loaves and Fishes with the funding required so people on Vancouver Island are not left to go hungry?
The Honourable Minister for Families, Youth and Social Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Wow. Like a second grade teacher just nails on a chalkboard.
At food banks in my community here in Ottawa and across the country. And what I hear consistently, Mr. Speaker, is what a difference the Canada Child Benefit has made for families that are relying on a food bank for service. The Canada Child Benefit provides monthly support for families up to $7,800 a year per child. This is timely support, which we know the Conservatives would oppose.
The Honourable Member for Scarborough Agincourt.
Mr. Speaker, the government is introducing a 2-month tax break for all Canadians. After all their talk about cutting taxes, you would expect the Conservatives to walk the walk and support this measure, but they voted against it. Can the Minister of Small Business speak more about what the government is doing to make life better and safer for Canadians and businesses?
Good question.
Yes.
Good question. The Honourable Minister for Small Business.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives are all talk and no action. Starting December 14, Canadians will get a GST holiday. The Conservatives talk about axing the tax, but they voted against removing the GST off groceries and family essentials. They say they'll build the homes, but vow to cut the Housing Accelerator Fund, which is helping build hundreds and thousands of homes right across the country. They say they will stop the crime, but they vote against our gun control measures. As you can see, Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives are the ones that are putting a stop to the measures that are helping Canadians and small businesses.
Order, please. The Honourable Member from Calgary Forest Lawn.
This Alberta NDP government created a fall fiscal fiasco as they failed to table their fall economic statement. After 9 years of inflationary deficits, adding more debt than every government before them combined, they have a lot to hide. Even the parliamentary budgeting officer said this feudal finance minister blew through her own fiscal guardrail of her $40 billion deficit. Why don't they just stop the economic arson, stop the tax hikes, stop the inflationary deficits, stop adding to the debt, and call a carbon tax election now?
Yep.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we know
Wreck-It Ralph.
the only thing the Conservatives are serving up for Christmas dinner are stale slogans.
The only thing that the Conservatives are serving up
Canada
for
Governor
Christmas
said at a Senate
dinner.
committee recently, government spending is not pushing up or pushing against us getting inflation down. The Parliamentary Budget Officer also recently said the current fiscal policy in Canada is sustainable. He also said we could spend up to 1.5% more of GDP. What's appalling is to understand how the Conservative Party of Canada won't step up to support a tax break with all their obsession about tax cuts.
Hey, anyone who's on the email list, check your emails. You've just been sent an email.
For Calgary,
it's important.
While the Liberals brag about turning temporary 2-month tax tricks like taking dimes off Doritos, common sense Conservatives will tax the tax for good, because their carbon tax scam is driving more than 2 million Canadians into a food bank in a single month and 1 in 4 to skip meals. If they're so sure about quadrupling their carbon tax scam, why don't they just stop? Stop breaking the country further. Call a carbon tax election now so Canadians can choose between more tax tricks or a common sense Conservative government that will bring home lower prices and powerful paychecks.
Hey. You can see why that's one of Pierre's right-hand man.
Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives want to talk about tax tricks. What I think is interesting is tricking Canadians into thinking that they're actually serious about cutting taxes for Canadians when the first opportunity they get to stand up in this House and support Canadians who they know well have been struggling through an inflationary period. And they won't. They stand up against, they oppose the very tax cuts that they campaigned on. A GST holiday for Canadians on essentials over the next 2 months is a good thing. I don't know how they can deny the support that Canadians deserve.
The honourable member for Simcoe North.
Mr. Speaker, last year the Finance Minister said that the deficit would be less than $40.1 billion. And now Parliament's still waiting for the public accounts to confirm whether the minister kept that promise. Can the minister spare us the suspense and tell us what the deficit was for last year?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, our government has stuck to our
Our government
and that's exactly why inflation has come down for 11 months in a row, has been within the Bank of Canada's target range for 11 months in a row. We were the first in the G7 to cut interest rates, and we've had 4 consecutive rate cuts. And we're looking forward to this Wednesday with the Bank of Canada. We'll have another meeting and looking forward to their announcement. Thank you.
Fucking Wreck-It Ralph. What a dumbass.
Colleagues, especially the honourable member from Abbotsford, please do not speak unless recognized by the Speaker. The honourable member from Simcoe North.
Mr. Speaker, what is the point of making promises that you don't intend to try or even keep? In 2020, the Finance Minister said that when the need for stimulus was over, it would be withdrawn. They didn't withdraw it. Then it was that the debt to GDP ratio would continue going down, except 1 year later, it went up. And then she said the deficit would be less than $40.1 billion. And lo and behold, we find out she's broke that promise too. So when will someone at least admit that these folks are committing economic vandalism and tell us what the deficit is, or are they just worried that it's going to shred all the credibility that she has left?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Our government will stack up and compare our record to the Conservatives and run on that any day of the week and twice on Sundays.
Order. I'm going to ask the honourable members to please not take and have conversations over those, especially those who are using devices to be able to listen to the proceedings of the House. The honourable Parliamentary Secretary from the top, please.
From the top. Our government will stack up and run our record, our fiscal and economic record against the Conservatives any day of the week and twice on Sunday. And I'm
happy. Colleagues, the more time that the Speaker has to spend on his feet, the fewer questions we have to get through in question periods. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our government will run on our record on economic policy against the Conservatives any day of the week, and twice on Sundays. We have
And twice on Sundays.
the lowest deficit, the lowest
Freaking Neanderthal.
GDP ratio. We have seen that the Stats Canada has revised the forecast for Canada for the last 3 years up, which is significant. And we're also rated by the IMF to have the strongest GDP growth in the G7. I think that economic record stands for itself, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. L'honorable député de Lac.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, ever since in 2023 the Safe Third Country Agreement was renegotiated, the Bloc Québécois has been sounding the alarm because there's a loophole that enables people who cross the border illegally to claim asylum after hiding for 14 days. And a CBSA
Just a reminder to drop a like on the video
confirms
and subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already.
that loophole and claimed asylum. That's just between April and September 2023. According to the CBSA, the real numbers are almost certainly higher. Will the government finally take action and do something about this 14-day loophole? The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Citizenship and Refugees. Well, if I understand correctly, Mr. Speaker, my colleague wants me to take action instantly here on the floor of the House of Commons without even letting the U.S. know. Of course, we care about safety and security at the border. We will continue to take action to guarantee that. I hope the Bloc Québécois will support our reform to the asylum system, which we'll be bringing forward soon, because last time, despite the fact that we were supported by the government of Quebec, they said no. It's really inconsistent, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member. Well, it's his job to answer questions. This is question period, Mr. Speaker. Anyway, this government has known for more than a year that this 14-day loophole is being exploited. It has known that for more than a year, thousands of people are illegally crossing the border to claim asylum, and it's known that that entire time, human traffickers have been abusing vulnerable people to the tune of $45,000. And yet the government has done nothing. It's inexcusable. It's inhumane, Mr. Speaker. Why have we had to wait until Donald Trump started making threats before this government would finally do something about illegal immigration?
That's honestly one of the most pathetic things.
For more than a year, Mr. Speaker.
Government didn't do shit.
Immigration. Looking at recent history with bringing the visa back on Mexico, Mr. Speaker, the Bloc Québécois was pleased with this, and we've been tightening things in the immigration system for over a year, and it's working. In November, the number of interceptions at the border was at the lowest level, and we will continue to secure our border.
The Honourable Member for Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Mr. Speaker, the Finance Minister's failure to table a timely fall economic statement goes to the core incompetency of this government. Canadians need a government to axe the carbon tax, build more homes by exempting the GST from new home construction, and fix the budget by getting spending under control. And Canadians are tired of waiting. Can the Finance Minister confirm if she will keep her promise that the deficit will not exceed her $40 billion fiscal guardrail? Yes or no, please?
Can't promise nothing.
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, it is great to learn today that our government will announce the fall economic statement. It will be tabled on December 16th, which is good news. And, you know, what's interesting is when the Conservatives say fix the budget, what they really mean to say, like Canadians should hear that as translated, means cut programs and services that Canadians rely on. Whether it's dental care, pharmacare, early childhood and education, any of the signature programs that have supported Canadians through this inflationary crisis, they're going to cut all of them.
Honourable Member for Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's nearly Christmas, and we're still waiting for the fall economic statement and for the public accounts, both of which should have been tabled in October. That's just basic management.
Yeah.
Canadians need to know how much debt this government's piling on, and if this government can't even manage the basics, like giving Canadians the straight facts about the public's finances, will they call an immediate election so that Canadians can elect a government that will?
There you go.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
I've been here for 5 years, thank God for the people of Whitby. I have never seen the level of obstruction in this House that I've seen over the last 40-something days, where the Conservatives have continued to filibuster and block every aspect of parliamentary functioning and work, and they're standing up complaining that the fall economic statement is just a bit too late for them. Well, you have done it to yourselves.
I remind all members to making sure that they pass all comments through the chair. À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît. Order.
Getting caught up in semantics. Oh, Greg.
Don't make me laugh.
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-Lévis. We need to stop these tax hikes and the skyrocketing debt and inflation, but that doesn't seem to matter to the Liberal bloc. But it's extremely important to the common sense Conservatives. We need to leave money in the pockets of Quebecers. That's our vision. We are wondering why the Bloc Québécois voted twice against our non-confidence motions and propped up this back
No.
every day.
Let bygones be bygones.
Will we have elections so that Quebecers can finally do something to choose a Conservative?
Pierre's hyped. Look at Pierre.
The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement.
Holy smokes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our colleague talked about common sense. Well, what is total nonsense is that in her own writing, there are 100 affordable housing units that are currently being built on Léo Couture Boulevard. They are currently being built by the Lévis Municipal Housing Bureau, and Minister Drainville from the government of Quebec and other stakeholders, and they're very proud of what they're accomplishing. And yet she lets the Conservative leader pretend that these housing units don't exist, and he also seems to want to stop construction of them.
For Fawn Woodbridge.
Mr. Speaker, the government has introduced a GST tax break during the holiday season that will help Canadians keep more money in their pockets, especially families with young children who need it most. Meanwhile, the Conservative leader and his party voted against this holiday tax break, all while they keep preaching to be in favor of tax cuts and helping Canadians. Can the Minister of Diversity and Inclusion please tell us what this federal government is doing to support hardworking Canadians during the Christmas season? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister for Diversity and Inclusion.
Mr. Speaker, it is indeed ironic that the Conservative leader, who loves to talk about cutting taxes, was quick to vote against the very tax cut that would put real money back in the pockets of Canadians. Mr. Speaker, we have already cut taxes for middle class and small businesses, and now with this GST cut, we're giving even more support for families. It's too bad, Mr. Speaker, that the Conservatives are only allowed to serve the needs of their leader rather than their own constituents. Our government will continue to focus on what matters, and that is delivering for Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Poilievre. Mr. Speaker, everyone knows that over the last 9 years, this Liberal government has plunged Canadians into debt. And on 2 occasions, unfortunately, the Bloc Québécois has propped this government up. Quebecers deserve much better. Once again, this minority government has lost control of public funds, since once again it will be tabling the fall economic.
See how he's wearing a Canadian pin? That's how it should be.
Is this the Christmas present that we're going to be getting? An extra deficit from this wasteful government?
Look at that.
Avant que je reconnaisse l'honorable ministre, juste inviter tous les députés.
I would just invite all members to not take the floor unless they've been recognized by the chair. The Honourable Minister of Innovation.
Oh my goodness, the little chihuahua.
I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. I know that the holidays are coming up, and the Conservatives love hearing children's stories and slogans, but even the member for Poilievre, a person I respect, but he knows perfectly well that we've made record investments. In 2023, Canada was the third country on the list of the countries that received the most investment, and we are investing in Canadians. in industry and Canadian workers, Mr. Speaker, we should be celebrating the investment that is being made in Canada.
The honourable member for Edmonton Mill Woods.
Harshandeep Singh, just 20 years old when he came to Canada to build a better life. He got a job like many other students as a security guard in Edmonton. Just 3 days after starting this job, he was murdered on the job. Our heartfelt condolences go out to his family and friends at this very difficult time. But Mr. Speaker, his killer was a violent criminal with past police interactions and a potentially long criminal history. This government changed the laws to make it easier for repeat violent offenders to roam free in our communities. When will they take the safety of our communities?
He struggled a little bit, but he got through it.
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I, like every member of Parliament, is very troubled by that story about that young man losing his life so cavalierly. And our condolences go to his family and to his entire community. What I would say with respect to keeping Canadians safe, what we're doing is working on multiple fronts. Part of that deals with gun control, and that's assault weapons and handguns. Another part of it is the bail reform, which we implemented at the behest of the provinces. And if there's more that needs to be under the criminal code, we are open to that. What we're also keen on is seeing in the province of Alberta and in other provinces, investments being made in courtroom spaces, in police officers, in JPs, and in Crown attorneys, so we can all do the work we need to keep Canadians safe.
The honourable member for Edmonton Mill Woods.
Mr. Speaker, violent gun crime has gone up over 100% since they have been in power. And in 1 year, 256 Canadians have been murdered by somebody that was out on bail or out on some type of condition. Harshandeep Singh's murder and many others cannot be accepted as just an unfortunate, unavoidable incident. It is a serious systemic failure when our government allows violent criminals with a long criminal record to go freely in our communities. When will the NDP Liberals stop this madness and prioritize the safety of Canadians? Because if they won't do it, we're ready.
Great.
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, the safety of Canadians is all of our responsibility. The tool that we have in this chamber is the Criminal Code of Canada. The tool that the provinces have is implementing the administration of criminal justice in their localities. What does that mean? That means hiring police officers. It means hiring crowns to argue about bail cases. It means ensuring JPs have the training to apply the law. And it means ensuring that there are detention facilities to house people who are being denied bail. These are critical facets that need to be invested in. We're doing the work we need to on the criminal code, and we'll continue to do so. What we expect is cooperation from the provinces.
The honourable member from Steveston, Richmond East.
Mr. Speaker, countries and businesses around the world are heavily investing in artificial intelligence. The benefits of this cutting-edge technology are already growing, finding efficiencies and spurring innovation. It's imperative that we secure the Canadian advantage. Can the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry update this House on how he's making sure that Canada leads the global shift to AI and that our workers, like the many AI companies in my hometown of Richmond, are the ones benefiting from the jobs and growth that come along with it?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for a great question, Mr. Speaker, because AI is in fact the technology of our time, Mr. Speaker. It's going to have an impact on every industry and every sector of economy, and it's going to help with productivity. Mr. Speaker, just last week, we announced our sovereign AI compute strategy to help build more data centers in Canada, to build essential infrastructure in our country, and to make sure that small and medium-sized businesses could access compute capacity. Mr. Speaker, we're going to work on this side of the House to make sure that we continue to be leader in AI, in responsible AI, attracting investment, attracting talent. Let's celebrate Canada, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, if you close your eyes, it sounds like a woman speaking.
Mr. Speaker, with the help of the Liberals, private investors have bought Norgate Apartments in Montreal. That's the biggest housing purchase in Quebec in 2024. And yet there is a housing crisis happening. People are very concerned about the fact that the Liberal government has let them fall through the cracks. Montrealers can barely afford rents as it stands. Instead of helping private investors get rich, the government could have helped build more affordable apartments. Why place the interests of private investors ahead of those of Montrealers? The Honourable Minister of Tourism. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. It gives me an opportunity to tell him, if he doesn't know already, that we have just made an announcement, in fact, in my writing, to bring 720 units outside market pricing. That's 720 new affordable units, because we don't just want to build new affordable housing. We want to make it sustainable and ongoing.
The honourable member for Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, the Canada Council for the Arts has not only had its funding cut in recent years, but significant inequities remain, leaving communities like mine dramatically underfunded. Today, MPs from 4 parties in this House have co-signed a letter, again bringing this to the attention of the Minister and calling for action. Will the Minister of Heritage commit to working with all interested MPs to restore federal arts funding and ensure all communities get their fair share?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Canadian Heritage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whether it's funding for the Fringe Festival in Vancouver or the Mermaid Theatre in King Hence, our government will always be there to support the arts. And I want to assure that member that I will work with him. We will work with him and any members that are interested in ensuring long-term sustainable funding for the cultural sector in this country. This afternoon, I'll be meeting with the CEO of the Canada Council for the Arts. We'll take this conversation up as well. But, Mr. Speaker, unlike Conservatives who believe that arts are only an elite topic, our party and at this side of the House, we believe that arts are the soul of the nation, and we will be there to support artists and the culture sector at every turn.
All right, that should be the end of QP.
Colleagues, it's indeed my honour for me to draw your attention of members to the presence of the gallery of Ms. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, a joint recipient of the 2001 Nobel Peace Prize.
Hello, miss. Are you a Nazi? I hate to have to ask, but given recent events, I feel like it may be mandatory. All right. Here we go.
16, the House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the motion of Mr. Poilievre relating to the business of supply. Call in the members.
Here we go. Now we're getting into the good stuff. Okay. They're going to be doing the vote here soon. Vote call. Opposition motion. Conservative Party of Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, and everybody in between, because this is Canada. We're now getting into el vote of non-confidence. Y'all ready for this? This is what we've been waiting for. So don't leave. Stay on your tippy toes. This is going to be good. If you haven't yet already, I'd like to encourage you guys to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps grow the channel, helps fight climate change for all I care. And most importantly, Justin Trudeau doesn't want you to do either of those.
No. There's no point of order at this point. Before the House proceeds to the taking of this deferred recorded division, colleagues, before the House proceeds to taking this deferred recorded division, I wish to remind honourable members of the following passage from House of Commons Procedure and Practice, 3rd edition, at page 587, under the heading, Decorum during the taking of a vote. Quote, from the time the Speaker begins to put the question until the results of the vote are announced, members are not to enter, leave, or cross the House, nor may they make any noise or disturbance. End quote. Je suis convaincu
I'm convinced that honourable members will comply to this indication to make sure that our operations can happen in an ordinate way. The question is as follows. Mr. Poilievre, seconded by Mr. Muse, moved that 1. Whereas the leader of the New Democratic Party said he ripped up his supply and confidence agreement with the Liberal government. 2. Whereas the NDP leader said the Liberals are too weak, too selfish and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people.
3. Whereas the NDP leader said that the Liberal government will always cave to corporate greed and always step in to make sure the unions have no power, in response to the Liberal Labour Minister's referrals to the Canadian Industrial Relations Board that ordered the workers of Teamsters Canada Rail Conference and the ILWU 514 to resume their duties, violating their right to strike. Puis-je dispenser? Therefore, the House agrees with the NDP leader, and the House proclaims that it has lost confidence in the Prime Minister and the government.
The 10-minute voting period for members voting electronically has started, and the House will now proceed to the vote for members participating in person. All those in favour of the motion will please rise.
Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Conservatives, everybody standing up. The bloc is standing up. Look at that.
Monsieur Deltel.
Monsieur Deltel.
Mrs. Stubb. Mr. Paulus.
Monsieur Paulus.
Mr. Scheer.
Mr. Scheer.
Mr. Upal.
Mr. Upal.
Miss Landsman.
Miss Landsman.
Mr. Halland.
Pierre doesn't have to stand because he put the motion forward. For anyone thinking that he's voting against his own motion.
This is great.
He doesn't have to stand.
Mr. Barlow.
Miss Dancho.
Miss Dancho.
Mr. Ellis.
Mr. Ellis.
Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Baldinelli.
Yeah, throw some W's in the chat. Here we go.
Mr. Kerr.
Here we go. This is what everybody's been waiting for.
Mr. Small.
Mr. Small.
Mr. Lawrence.
Mr. Lawrence.
Mr. Duncan, Stormont Dundas, South Glengarry.
Mr. Duncan, Stormont Dundas, South Glengarry.
Monsieur Berthold.
Monsieur Berthold.
Mr. Workington.
Mr. Workington.
Mr. Chong.
Here we go.
Mr. El Boutaif.
Mrs. Kuzi.
Mrs. Kuzi.
Mr. Seaback.
Mr. Seaback.
Miss Ferrari.
Miss Ferrari.
Mrs. Block.
Mrs. Block.
Mr. Stewart, Miramichi Grand Lake.
Mr. Stewart, Miramichi Grand Lake.
Mr. Chambers.
Mr. Chambers.
Such a silly and outdated.
Doherty.
Mr. Doherty.
Mr. McCauley, Edmonton West.
Mr. McCauley, Edmonton West.
Mr. Lloyd.
Mr.
Outdated
Lloyd.
system
Mr.
here.
Strahl.
Going one by one.
Mr. Brassard.
Mr. Brassard.
Mr. Aitchison.
Mr. Aitchison.
Mr. Godin.
Monsieur Godin.
Mr. Hoback.
Mr. Hoback.
Mr. Morantz.
Mr. Morantz.
Mrs. Roberts.
Mrs. Roberts.
Mr. Malillo.
Mr. Malillo.
Let's go, folks. Get them W's going in the chat, eh?
Grant Nyman.
Madame Vien.
So far, no hiccups.
Mrs. Gallant.
Mrs. Gallant.
Mr. Shipley.
Mr. Shipley.
So the bloc is being lazy. Instead of showing up and voting in person, they're going to be voting. A lot of them, most of them, are going to be voting electronically.
Mr. Calkins.
Mr. Calkins.
Miss Rude.
Miss Rude.
Trudeau, for crying out loud, is not even here. He's in Halifax.
Mr. Generou.
Mr. Major.
Mr. Major.
Mr. Davidson.
Mr. Davidson.
Mr. Martel.
Mr. Martel.
Mr. Gould.
Mr. Gould.
Mr. Caputo.
Mr. Caputo.
Mr. Epp.
Mr. Epp.
Miss Rempel Garner.
Miss Rempel Garner.
Mr. Zimmer.
Mr. Zimmer.
Mr. Majumdar.
Mr. Majumdar.
Mr. Cram.
Mr. Cram.
Mr. Tolmie.
Mr. Tolmie.
Mrs. Wagenthal.
Mrs. Wagenthal.
Mr. Albus.
Mr. Albus.
Mr. Drishin. Correction, Mr. Bragdon.
Mr. Bragdon.
Mr. Dalton.
Mr. Dalton.
Mr. Nader.
Mr. Nader.
Mrs.
Nader.
Battlefords Lloydminster.
Mrs. Swat Battleford Lloydminster.
Like from
Mr.
Chow.
Mr. Weber.
Show.
Weber.
Mr. McGuire.
Lightning McQueen.
Mr. Reed.
Mr. Reed.
Mr. Shields.
Mr. Shields.
Mr.
Mader.
Mr. Fop-Provencher.
Mr. Motts.
Mr. Motts.
Mr. Williamson.
I watched too many.
Mr. Arnold.
Mr. Arnold.
Mr. D'Entremont.
Mr. D'Entremont.
There you go.
Morrison.
So conservatives,
Mr.
unanimous.
Mr. Soroka.
Mrs. Vecchio.
Mrs. Vecchio.
Mr. Carey.
Mr. Carey.
Mr. Vidal.
Mr. Vidal.
Mr. Dowdall.
Mr. Dowdall.
Mr. Lake.
Mr. Lake.
Mr. Vierson.
Mr. Vierson.
Mr. Ruff.
Mr. Ruff.
Mr. Fast.
Mr. Fast.
Mr. Leipert.
Mr. Leipert.
Mr. Leslie.
Mr. Leslie.
Mr. Giovanni.
Mr. Giovanni.
Mr. Stewart, Toronto St. Paul's.
Mr. Stewart, Toronto St. Paul's.
Monsieur Terrien.
Monsieur Terrien.
Madame Larouche.
Madame Larouche.
Madame Chabot.
Madame Chabot.
Madame Desbiens.
Madame Desbiens.
Wait, did the NDP chick stand up by accident?
Monsieur Sauvé.
Monsieur Sauvé.
Wait, did the NDP chick stand up by accident?
Colleagues.
Did I see that right? Leah got up. She looks scared to death. I think everybody's confused. It might be an accident. It might be an accident. It might be an accident.
Can I ask the honourable member, please, from Miramichi Grand Lake to please not take the floor?
Yeah, no, Leah, the watermelon wearing pin chick. That doesn't narrow it down, eh? They all wear the same.
All those opposed to the motion will please rise.
Mr. Blair.
Mr. Blair.
Boo!
Miss Ing.
Boo!
McKinnon Gatineau.
Mr. McKinnon Gatineau.
Miss Anand.
Boo! Put some L's in the chat.
Tassie.
Mr.
Boo!
Annie.
Miss Sachs.
Miss Sachs.
Miss Murray.
Miss Murray.
Miss Groh.
Miss Grove.
Mr. Casey.
Mr. Casey.
Mr. Vandal.
Mr. Vandal.
Miss Haidu.
Miss Haidu.
Mr. Miller.
Mr. Miller.
Miss Sahota.
Miss Sahota.
Madame Le Boutillier.
Madame Lepoutier.
Madame Bibot.
Madame Bibot.
Mrs. Valdez.
Mrs. Valdez.
Boo.
Jazak.
Miss Jazik.
Monsieur Dubourg.
Monsieur Dubourg.
Madame Lalonde.
Madame Lalonde.
Mr. Sheehan.
Mr. Sheehan.
Miss Jones.
Miss Jones.
Miss O'Connell.
Miss O'Connell.
Mr. Oliphant.
Mr. Oliphant.
Mr. Gerritsen.
Mr. Gerritsen.
Mr. Lamoureux.
Mr. Lamoureux.
Madame Fortier.
Madame Fortier.
Mr. Fragiscados.
Mr. Fagascados.
Monsieur Lauzon.
Mr. Lauzon.
Mr. May Cambridge.
Mr. May Cambridge.
Monsieur El Khoury.
Monsieur El Khoury.
Mr. Fonseca.
Mr. Fonseca.
Mr. Hardy.
Mr. Hardy.
Mr. Yakono.
Mr. Yakono.
Mr. Johari.
Mr. Johari.
Mr. Lightbound.
Mr. Lightbound.
Mr. Nagvi.
Mr. Nakvi.
Mr. Badaway.
Mr. Badaway.
Mrs. Atwin.
Mrs. Atwin.
Mr. Sarai.
Mr. Sarai.
Ms. Vandenbelt.
Ms. Vandenbelt.
Monsieur Sanson.
Monsieur Sanson.
Monsieur Serry.
Monsieur Sanson.
Mr. Long.
Mr. Long.
Mr. McDonald Avalon.
Mr. McDonald Avalon.
Mr. McKinnon Coquitlam Port Coquitlam.
Mr. McKinnon Coquitlam Port Coquitlam.
Mr. McLeod.
Mr. McLeod.
Mr. Morrissey.
Mr. Morrissey.
Monsieur Robillard.
Now it all depends on the Liberal MPs voting electronically. Will they grow a spine and vote yes?
Mr.
Because
Miss
a lot of the Liberal or the
Miss Hefner.
Mr. Nur Mohammed.
Mr. Nur
Rebels
Mohammed.
Mr. Chang.
aren't
Mr.
there,
Chang.
so they could just vote
Mrs.
electronically.
Zayed.
Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers.
Miss Yip.
Ms. Yip.
Mr. Lewis Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Lewis Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Van Bynen.
Mr. Van Bynen.
Mr. Baines.
Mr. Bain.
Miss Bradford.
Miss Bradford.
Mr. Chahal.
Mr. Chahal.
Madame Chatel.
Madame Chateau.
Mr. Hanley.
Mr. Hanley.
Miss Kayabaga.
Miss Kayabaga.
Madame Lapointe.
Madame Lapointe.
Mr. Miao.
Mr. Meow.
Miss Taylor Roy.
Miss Taylor Roy.
Miss Thompson.
Miss Thompson.
Mr. Carr.
Mr. Carr.
Miss Gainey.
Miss Gainey.
Mr. Julian.
Mr. Julian.
Miss Matheson.
Miss Matheson.
Oh, she can't vote nay. She already voted yay. No, 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 no. You should have been paying attention. You can't vote twice.
Mr. Johns.
Mr. Johns.
Miss McPherson.
Miss McPherson.
Miss Idlout.
Miss Idlout.
Miss Gazan.
Miss Gazan.
Mr.
Yeah,
Green.
so the NDP's voting.
Mr. McGregor.
Mr. McGregor.
Mr.
Put your
Pratt.
fist down, jackass.
Miss Blaney.
Miss Blaney.
Madame Hughes.
Madame Hughes.
Monsieur Boulris.
Monsieur Boulris.
Mr. Angus.
Mr. Angus.
Miss Zarillo.
Miss Zarillo.
Miss Kwan.
Miss Kwan.
Miss May Sandwich Gulf Islands.
Miss May Sandwich Gulf Islands.
Mr. Morris.
Mr. Morris.
La Chambre attend.
The House will now wait for the electronic voting period to end before resuming its proceeding.
There you go. All right. So keep an eye. Liberals, nay. The Bloc, yay. Libs, nay. The Bloc, yay. Anthony Rhoda, I did not see that coming. How does he even have a vote still? This shit's so weird. Anthony Rhoda, traitor. He voted nay. Maudit Saint-Seigneur. Yeah. NDP's nay. Bloc is yay. I haven't seen a single lib. I haven't seen a single lib vote yay. They got a tight ship on that, eh? They're scared for their jobs. NDP voted nay. Nay. Conservative, yay. Bloc, yay. Yeah, I think we all know how this is going to turn out, huh? I mean, we know now. We know what the outcome is. We'll wait for the final count. Imagine Trudeau just trolled and voted yay, just for fun. He could have. If he was funny enough, he could have. There, Kevin Vaughn voted yay. That's good. I like Kevin Vaughn. Not a single liberal rebel voted yay. Bunch of pussies. Omar Algebra, he's still there. What the hell's he doing there? Yeah. Randy voted nay. Get the fuck out of here, Randy. Come on. Pablo voted nay. Pussy. Yeah. Look at Stephen Guilbeault. They got like an old, kind of nicer photo of him. Yeah. Marco Mendicino voted nay. Give me a break. This just hurts my soul. Han Dong voted nay. Like, why? Why are you guys doing this? Time and time again. For crying out loud. Yeah. Guys, we know how this turns out. We know. Like 180 something to 150.
The electronic voting period has ended. If members were not able to vote due to technical difficulties, they may now use the raise hand function and the chair will recognize them.
I see that, I was just saying, Mrs. Fry?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, my app doesn't seem to want to work, so I am voting nay. Thank you.
I heard yay. She voted yay. I heard it. We all heard it. All 9,000 people watching the stream. We all heard yay.
I have the the honourable member from London, for London Fanshawe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Because of the noise, I could not hear if my vote was cast, so I would like to confirm that it was called and voted. I vote nay.
She voted yay. We all heard it. All 9,000 people watching. We heard yay.
The table will now compile the results of the vote.
Yeas pour 152, 152. Nays contre 180, 180.
I declare the motion defeated.
I see that the honourable leader of the opposition is rising on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, you went out of your way before the vote to point out that members are not allowed to come and go during the vote. I did note that the NDP leader came in right in the middle of the vote, having missed the fact that the vote was on his own words. Would you please call him to order for having had his team vote against his own words?
There you go. Attaboy, Pierre. Attaboy, Pierre.
I see that the honourable member from New Westminster, Burnaby, New Westminster,
he had to
is also rising.
Pre-start his Maserati.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. That's very rich coming from the leader of the opposition, who has
Shut the fuck up,
this
Peter.
House.
You get two first names.
Own motions in opposition to, and refused to.
You get two first names. We don't trust you.
Mr. Speaker, it is proper.
Colleagues, I very patiently listened to the member from the official opposition. I'd like to hear the honourable member from New Westminster Burnaby. I didn't catch the last little bit of his comment.
It's a bit rich from the hypocrisy we've seen from the Leader of the Official Opposition, but as you know, Mr. Speaker, in virtual Parliament you have the right to vote remotely and come in for a second vote. That is indeed what has happened in this case.
So indeed, I would say that the fault is mine as Speaker for not making it clear for the purposes of electronic voting. There is a possibility for, as all members know, and members have from time to time exercised that privilege, is that they're able to come in when with this advent of electronic voting.
The Honourable Member for Argentan-la-Petite-Nation, point of order. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, I mean, we're just getting into silliness now.
You took the time to explain the rules before the first vote to make sure there were no comings and goings. But I'd like to check the cameras because the Leader of the Official Opposition rose during the first vote, left his seat, and then sat back down again before the end of the vote. I would like to thank the Honourable Member for his intervention. I recognise the Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Point of order. We heard an MP earlier, and I think the rules are very clear. To respect our interpreters, I heard a member address the House virtually without her headset. Is that acceptable? The rules should be applicable to all, Mr. Speaker. Indeed, the Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier is right if it was during debate, but it's during a vote. And it was during technical difficulties. It's our usual practice that we allow people to address the clerk without compliant headset and a compliant microphone. The House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the motion of Mr. Singh relating to the business of supply. The question is as follows.
Seconded by Ms. Barron, moved that, given that, 1, Canadians are facing an affordability crisis and need more than temporary relief. 2, the government's $250 working...
Shut the fuck up. Shut up. Shut up. Come on. For crying out loud. Look, am I riding a hopium wave right now? Expecting the unexpected? Absolutely. All right? Absolutely. I thought maybe there was a chance. I thought there was a chance that you could see something miraculous. And maybe the rebels would have voted against Justin Trudeau and in favor of voter non-confidence, right? You never know. For crying out loud, you never freaking know what's going on. That's so frustrating.
Like recent graduates trying to enter the workforce, retired seniors, people with
my bad.
disabilities,
I cut the feed early.
Workers.
So right now they're voting on a motion by Jagmeet to axe the tax.
Others in need
That's
are
my bad.
included. And
paid for that measure by putting in place an excess profit tax targeting the largest and most profitable corporations. The 10-minute period for members voting electronically has started, and the House will now proceed to the vote for members participating in person. All those in favor of the motion will please rise.
Mr. Singh.
Mr. Singh.
Mr. Julian.
Mr. Julian.
Ms. Matheson.
Ms. Matheson.
So Jagmeet is putting a motion. This is Jagmeet's motion. What the frig are we watching?
Green.
Mr. McGregor.
Okay.
Mr. Bachrach.
I'm caught up on what's going on. Jagmeet is copying Pierre Poilievre to vote to remove the GST permanently. He's trying to copy Pierre Poilievre.
Ms. May Sanishko-Filan.
Ms. May Sanishko-Filan.
Mr. Morris.
All these people are in favor of Jagmeet's bill, but not in favor of Pierre. This doesn't make any sense.
Ms. Murray.
Ms. Murray.
The Liberals are voting nay.
Scroll.
Mr. Casey.
Mr. Casey.
Ms. Sahota.
Ms. Sahota.
Madame Le Boutillier.
Are the Conservatives going to vote nay as well?
Madame Bigot.
This is so weird. Politics is just it's so stupid.
Mr. Sheehan.
Mr. Sheehan.
Ms. Jones.
Miss Jones.
Miss O'Connell.
Miss O'Connell.
Mr. Gerritsen.
Mr. Gerritsen.
Mr. Lamoureux.
Mr. Lamoureux.
Madame Fortier.
Madame Fortier.
Mr. Fragascados.
Mr. Fragascados.
Mr. Vancouverden.
So in this bill, though, there's also a new tax that Jagmeet is adding. So it's not just to cut the GST permanently. It's to add an additional tax in. So he's being a little sneak.
Mr. Johari.
Mr. Johari.
Mr. Naqvi.
It's not just to cut the GST and to axe the
Mrs.
tax.
Atwin.
Mrs. Atwin.
Mr.
Jagmeet's a freaking dork.
Ms. Vandenbeld.
So Jagmeet is adding, trying to put this motion forward to to remove one tax and add another.
Mr. McKinnon, Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam.
Mr. McLeod.
If you're tuning in and you're thinking,
Mr. Morris.
man, what the hell am I watching? This seems stupid.
Madam Shanahan.
Mr. Sarbanes.
You're not alone. Everyone is thinking the exact same thing. That this is just stupid.
Mrs. Zayed.
Mrs. Zayed.
Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers.
Ms. Yip.
Ms. Yip.
Mr. Lewis Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Lewis Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Van Bynen.
Mr. Van Bynen.
Mr. Baines.
Mr. Baines.
Ms. Bradford.
Miss Bradford.
Madame Chatel.
Madame Chatel.
Mr. Hanley.
Mr. Hanley.
Ms. Kayabaga.
Miss Kayabaga.
Madame Lapointe.
Madame Lapointe.
Mr. Miao.
Mr. Meow.
Ms. Taylor-Roy.
Miss Taylor Roy.
Ms. Thompson.
Miss Thompson.
Mr. Carr.
Mr. Carr.
Ms. Gainey.
Miss Gainey.
Que tous ceux qui s'opposent à la motion.
All those
And then the
opposed to motion
Conservatives
will
are
please
consent.
rise. I'm sorry.
Mr. Scheer.
Mr. Scheer.
Mr. Schmale.
Mr. Schmale.
Mr. Bazan.
Mr. Bazan.
Mr. Williams.
Mr. Williams.
Mr. Perkins.
Mr. Perkins.
Mr. Deltel.
Monsieur Deltel.
Mrs. Stubbs.
Mrs. Stubbs.
Mr. Paulus.
So dumb.
Mr. Upal.
Mr. Upal.
Mr. Halan.
Mr. Halan.
Miss Lewis Haldeman Norfolk.
Miss Lewis Haldeman Norfolk.
Mr. Barrett.
Mr. Barrett.
Mrs. Gray.
Mrs. Gray.
Mr. Barlow.
Mr. Barlow.
Mr. Ellis.
Mr. Ellis.
Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Baldinelli.
Mr. Baldinelli.
Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Kimmich.
Mr. Kimmich.
Mr. Kurek.
Mr. Kirk.
Mr. Jennis.
Mr. Jennis.
Mr. Lawrence.
Mr. Lawrence.
Mr. Duncan, Stormont Dundas, South Gary.
Mr. Duncan, Stormadunda, South Gary.
Mr. Berthold.
Mr. Berthold.
Mr. Workington.
Mr. Workington.
Miss Ferrari.
Miss Ferrari.
Mr. Chambers.
Mr. Chambers.
Mr. Viss.
Mr. Viss.
Mr. McCauley in Edmonton West.
Mr. McCauley, Edmonton West.
Mr. Lloyd.
Here with the 279 saying the NDP and the Liberals are finished.
Mr.
Done.
Brassard.
Mr. Brassard.
Yeah, unfortunately they're not.
Mr. Godin.
Monsieur Godin.
Mr. Hope.
Woody Doppelganger with the 5 saying it's official that the NDP are working for their leader's pension.
Mr. Tucker.
Mrs. Cramp Nyman.
This is politics. It's
Madame
greasy.
Yang.
It's absolutely greasy.
Mr. Patzer.
Mr. Patzer.
Mrs. Gallen.
Mrs. Gallen.
Do with 10 saying, from what I heard, this confidence vote was to expose the NDP on how they are not for the people and wreck the NDP's voter base, aka
Mr. Steinman.
take out Liberal
Mr.
support.
Calkins.
Mr. Calkins.
I mean, yeah, that's exactly kind of
Mr.
what this is working towards.
Mr.
We
Major.
didn't get a vote,
Mr. Major.
a positive vote. We
Mr. Gould.
Mr. Gould.
Mr. Caputo.
aren't getting an early election, it
Mr.
seems, at
F.
least not before Christmas.
Mr. Cram.
Mr. Cram.
But it does definitely expose Jagmeet's hypocrisy.
Mrs. Wagenthal.
Mr. Albus.
Mr. Albert.
Mr. Bragdon.
Quenisma with the 2 saying, let's vote Pierre Poilievre government.
Mr. Nader.
We're all waiting.
Mr. McLean.
All freaking waiting.
McLean.
Mr. McGuire.
Mr. McGuire.
Mr. Reed.
Woody Doppelganger with 5 saying, don't
Shields.
care how they vote as long as they
Mr.
vote to bring down the
Falk-Balanche.
Liberal
Mr. Falk-Balanche.
Mr. Williamson.
Mr. Williamson.
that they
Mr.
can't come
Arnold.
soon enough.
Mr. Arnold.
Mr. D'Entremont.
Mr. D'Entremont.
Mr. Soroka.
Mr. Soroka.
Mr. Carey.
Mr. Carey.
Mr. Vidal.
Mr. Vidal.
Mr. Dowdle.
Mr. Dowdle.
Mr. Lake.
Mr. Lake.
Mr. Vierson.
Mr. Vierson.
Mr. Ruff.
Mr. Ruff.
Mr. Fast.
Mr. Fast.
Mr. Leipert.
Mr. Leipert.
Mr. Leslie.
Mr. Leslie.
Mr. Giovanni.
Mr. Giovanni.
Mr. Stewart, Toronto St. Paul's.
Mr. Stewart, Toronto St. Paul's.
Monsieur Terrien.
Monsieur Terrien.
Madame Larouche.
Madame Larouche.
Monsieur Sauvé.
Monsieur Sauvé.
Maintenant que la période de
The House will now wait for the electronic voting period to end before resuming its proceedings.
Okay. Well, there you go. Let's see what these people are voting for. Ay, ay, ay. In the meantime, folks, I would recommend everyone joins the mailing list so you can be updated on some very important emails that get sent to Greg Fergus about the petition, any ongoing petitions like that. And the best way to do that is by clicking the link in the description, stopmutingthemic.ca. And then you'll be presented with this website right here. So you go down to the box, at the very bottom of the page, sign the petition, make your voice heard. Sign up with your email address to receive news and updates. You enter your first name, your last name, and your email address, and then you are added, ladies and gentlemen, to the email list. And that is, I mean, that's how we're going to do things a little bit. You know, we're going to send out emails. One was sent out during question period. I know there's some people that were in the chat that didn't know how to do it. So I threw the chat on the keyboard, instructed people how to do it. But that's how you do that. Some other people saying I didn't get an email. It wasn't sent out. There's a lot of people on that email list. And then I'm going to close the poll in the live chat right now that says, which party will you vote for? And you can see 96% of people, over 6,100 people voted Conservatives. So there's a massive demand right now for Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party. Yeah, it's looking good. All right. Well, let's see. I guess we're going to wait and see how this plays out here, this vote. In the meantime, I'm going to read off the rest of the super chats, get all caught up. Moldy Basement with the 5 saying, been waiting for this. I'm sorry that the vote did not go as planned, Moldy. I am. Josie Coat with the $3.99 super sticker. I appreciate that. Chungus Gamer, Sunshine put a poll of what will happen and pray. Chungus Gamer with the 2 saying, don't make me laugh, bro drinks Canadian tears. That's when the House Speaker said, don't make me laugh, because he was starting to chuckle a little bit by what was all the bickering that was going on. That was weird. That's a weird thing to say. I don't like Greg. I don't like Greg Fergus at all. He might be a nice person outside of politics, outside of being the House Speaker, but he's a garbage House Speaker. I genuinely think that without going through the political process of being elected MP and then getting voted in as House Speaker, if I could just snap my fingers and be a House Speaker, man, Parliament would be running way smoother than it already does. Way smoother. Chungus Gamer with the 2 saying, free the leaf. Raz with the 2, when's the vote actually going to take place? It already did, Raz. It already did. It was 180 something to 150 something. Did not get pushed through. Chungus Gamer with the 2 saying, bro, someone tell Fergus to get off JT's balls. Someone had to say it. Fergus the meat writer. I see a common theme there, Chungus. Let's see here. Coney Smile with the 2 saying, send coal in the stocking to the Liberals and the NDP. Yeah, all the voters too, all the supporters, they get a piece of coal. Trudeau's Ego with the $13.99 saying, do a poll, Jasper, on which party everyone will be voting for. 8,000 people in the chat's a lot. Yeah, that's why I actually did the poll, because I saw your comment. So thank you for that. Over 6,000 people voted. Thanks for the stream. Found you during the honkening and never ready to leave. Praying for our northern neighbors again. And that is Paulo Frere with the $4.99 American. Thank you, Paulo. The Liberal for London North Centre sounds like a serial killer, says Jordan English. You'd have to remind me who the name is. I don't know who the name is. V13 Savage, welcome to the membership. Sir Ozzy Charming, welcome to the membership. 2 months. Corey, welcome to the membership. Javon with $6.99 saying no early election. Jagmeet doesn't care what Canadians want, just like Trudeau doesn't care what the Canadian people want. And turns out you were right. So good prediction, Javon. Next row with the 2 saying Jasper ain't wearing pants. Andrew Lepence with the 2 saying video of the Post truck license, or the Canada Post license plate AA33. I don't know what that symbolizes, but thank you. Let's see here. Oh, look at the block leader. Eves shot it down. What a guy.
I wish to inform the House that the electronic voting period
Shot
is
down
finished.
Jagmeet's freaking weird thing.
If members were not able to vote due to technical difficulties, they may now use the raise hand function and the chair will recognize them.
Le bureau va maintenant compiler les résultats du vote.
The table will now compile the results of the vote.
Yes pour 28-28. Nays contre 303-63.
Je déclare la motion rejetée.
I declare the motion defeated.
Oh, the honourable member from New Westminster Burnaby is rising on a point of order.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. During this important vote for the NDP to ensure that the GST was taken off family essentials and home heating and telecom, the leader of the official opposition ran away. He fled the scene. Couldn't come up with a...
Je désire informer la Chambre qu'en raison...
I wish to inform...
Malice Gaming with the 2 saying, American here, I love Pierre, hopes he gets in. You and me both.
Government orders will be extended by 30 minutes.
Farzan with 5 saying, good work. Thank you.
Oh, the honourable member from Kingston the Islands is rising on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, I'm rising on a point of order out of question period. Mr. Speaker, I'm really afraid that an extremely dangerous precedent is being set with respect to how you're allowing questions to continue to go on when they're clearly not about the administration of business. We've had Conservatives today, a number of them, bring up issues, talk about the NDP for the...
El Presidente $2 super chat saying, Costco glizzy for you, Jasper. Reveal the pants.
Will the government or will the Prime Minister let the NDP leader do something? And it's clearly not in line with government business. Mr. Speaker, I go back to my question.
I wish to only do this in person. There you go. Boom. Mike muted. Tabarnak. Shut the fuck up, Mark Gerritsen. You freaking weirdo. Folks, I am wearing pants today. As you can see, I got myself some jeans on. Thanks for the support. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for the super chats. Thanks for the loves. Thanks for the memberships. Thanks for the liking the stream and subscribing to the channel above and beyond everything else. Today was not a success in terms of toppling the government and having an early election, potentially before Christmas. But it was successful in the fact that the Bloc and the Conservatives are now actually agreeing on the fact that Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government, the Liberal coalition with the NDP, is just needs to go. We need an exterminator force. And Jagmeet Singh, I mean, hypocrisy shown at the highest level. Literally, the motion of non-confidence that was tabled was using Jagmeet Singh's own words and putting it on the motion. So that just goes to show that Jagmeet Singh is not really for the people. He doesn't stand by his own words. He's a greedy, greedy cockroach of a politician. But hey, what do you expect from the NDP? That's the end of the live stream, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. I know it's not the outcome that we all wanted. I think deep down we were all thinking that this was going to be the outcome, and we were just hoping for something different. But nonetheless, that's what it is. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next live stream tomorrow for a question period. Peace, love, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. I believe I'm all caught up on super chats, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye for now.